I'd like to call to order this regular meeting of the Boulder Valley Board of Education for Tuesday, October 11th, 2022. Laura, would you please call the roll?
Garcia.
Here.
Gebhardt.
Here.
Niznik.
Here.
Rajpal.
Here.
Sargent.
Here.
Sweeney Moran.
Here.
Sis.
Here.
Thank you.
I'd like to remind everybody that the mission of the Boulder Valley School District is to create challenging, meaningful, and engaging learning opportunities so that all children thrive and are prepared for successful, civically engaged lives. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us electronically on BV22. We're glad to have you observe and participate in our meetings. At this time, is there a motion on the agenda?
So move to approve the agenda.
That, I don't see a second. So, Nicole?
I would like to move that we amend the agenda.
And I'll second that. It's okay.
Board President Gebhardt, we need a second before we get the motion to amend, please.
I
I'll second
seconded
it.
it.
Oh, you did? Okay, thank
Yeah.
you.
All right, Nicole?
Oh. We're good. Yeah, I wanted to make a motion to amend tonight's agenda by removing the proposed resolution 22-29 and the MOU from the action item 9.4, as these items are posted to the board docs less than 24 hours in advance, which is not in accordance with board policy BEDA.
Board members, discussion?
Yeah, I guess I'd like to hear from Kathleen. You know, we discussed at the end of last meeting putting this on the agenda. I mentioned at that point that we were discussing putting on the agenda for the third or fourth time. I emailed on Friday pointing out it was not on the agenda and was told it would be dealt with shortly. If it got put, 20 hours ahead of time? I guess I'm trying to understand why it is that we can't just move forward with this. This is the library resolution.
I thought we were going to put it on study and action on the same agenda. We've never discussed it. So I thought it was going to be on study, and then we could actually take action on it the same day, but it's not on study at all, it's just on action.
If we can take action on it while it's on study, I think that's fine too. I guess that's why I was sort of hoping Kathleen would weigh in. I think there have been a few conversations in the last few days. I just would love to understand what it means if we move it to study.
So the item being discussed was originally presented on the agenda that was posted on Friday as item 12.3. Because of the way that the board's agenda is broken down between action and study items, after reviewing the content of what that item would include with the specifics of a resolution that would be voted on, I made the recommendation to move it from the study area to the action area so that it would be clear to our public that it was something on which the board would take action tonight. The board's agenda has a lot more specificity to it than is required by Colorado law. This is really about informing our public about those items that the board will take up for consideration. I don't see it as a open meetings law or a notice problem under state law. Board member Rajpal is pointing out that the board's policy BEDA has some additional specificity that I understand the board member is calling into question as applied to this item.
Board members, any other discussion?
I just need some clarification. So if you move it to study tonight, we can act on it tonight?
It has not been the board's practice to act on items that are listed as study only. In the last couple of meetings, the board has taken a different approach to resolutions than we have historically. Typically, resolutions considered by the board are studied and acted upon the same night, so they appear only under the action items. it's possible for the board to have items on action that they decide to defer action on, so they're only studied and then they're brought back again if there are changes that board members would like to see made.
So could we have an amendment to your amendment that we will study it and act on it tonight?
Kathleen, I guess I'm trying to understand what Richard is asking. Is there anything that we would do on study that we can't do on action in terms of the way we would examine a document?
On either study or action, the board can study an item. It has been the board's practice, if it is going to vote on an item, to include it on the action part of the agenda. So my understanding of Board Member Rajpal's concern is that while it might have been discussed or referenced that it would be included on an agenda, the resolution itself was not attached until yesterday, and at that point, we moved the item from the study section to the action section.
I think part of that is the clarification that I was under the impression after our last meeting that we were going to be discussing the process for which we decide to work through resolutions moving forward, not an actual current ballot initiative that covers one locality in our very large district.
I'll just weigh in real quick as well and say that was also one of my understandings from last meeting. It left a little unclear, but I believe we were going to be discussing the process, which obviously we need clarity on, it seems. I
Stacy
actually
and
thought it
Rob.
was both things. I thought that yes, we need a process, but because of the time-sensitive manner of this particular request, we were going to act on it in addition to coming up with criteria for a process that this particular resolution would be precluded from, which may have an impact on how we vote for it, right? I mean, who knows? But my understanding is we were going to do both of those things tonight.
And does the process come before or after this particular resolution?
The process would have no regard for this resolution. This would be outside of that process because we haven't discussed the process yet. But if I recall, there were at least 3 or 4 board members, I was not one of them, who said they wanted it as an action item tonight. And so there wasn't time to do the process. We decided we would also have to discuss a process. That was how I understood it.
I recall the same thing, Stacy, and yes, there were 4 board members who requested it.
We didn't take a vote on that, though. But Rob, what did you want to say?
Well, we're just trying to, as staff, create the space for the board to try to do what the board wants to do without the board having a discussion on what it is they want to do, which is why at the end of the last meeting, I asked them for some clarification. So if it's the desire of the board to potentially act, as Kathleen shared, if you keep it on action, right, then you could talk, study, that nothing is compelling you to take action. Is that correct?
Yes.
And then furthermore, if it were, so we don't have a study then action option as we're trying to follow parliamentary procedures. And so I think that, to the extent that we know that the board wants to have a discussion, that was very clear. We know that this is a timely issue because if the board does decide to take some action, that it has to be quick because of the time of the vote. And so, our efforts were in a with the hope to provide the board everything that you might want as you consider this decision. But whether action, study, what have you, whatever you all feel like would help you accomplish what it is that you're trying to accomplish tonight, which is to have a conversation. And then if that conversation goes one way or the other, then you would have the ability to act. And so from what I'm hearing and understanding, that if you were to leave it on action, that would give the board the opportunity to study and act. Is that correct, Kathleen?
That's correct.
Can I ask another question? If we remove it from the agenda, we still have another board meeting that we could follow our policy and get it properly noticed, and we could still address it before the election. Is that correct?
I think so. There were several sections to that. I do think there are several options. I think that the motion to amend the agenda could have a friendly amendment to return it to study and defer action for a future board meeting, and then the board could still have a discussion. There could be a motion to defer this item entirely until the next board meeting, which I understand is the motion to amend that's on the table. And just for a point of clarification, the board's process for addressing resolutions on ballot items that the board discussed at the last meeting is contained in Board Item 9.2, which is the board's policy platform. The red line language responds to the board's discussion at the last meeting that we want to have, that the board would like to have a systematic process for addressing ballot items, which means addressing them during the fall prioritization meeting during election years, which due to the timing that we have, this resolution doesn't fit within that future process that the board can also consider.
Further questions or comments? Kitty?
Well, this one is just a housekeeping piece that, for people who actually look at board docs and dive deep into it, there were 2 resolutions that were listed as 22-29, but it's been fixed.
That was a clerical error, and I fixed it.
Yeah, I know, and that's why I was just saying, I noticed it, but if other people didn't and they're confused, it's fixed.
Well, if I can offer my own personal comment on this, and that is that if we're able to discuss the topic in the action part of the agenda and then vote on it, I'm pretty much in favor of that.
Any other comments in regards to this motion? So can we have a, can you reread the motion that we're going to be voting on?
Point of order, is there a second on the motion to amend the original motion?
You seconded it, right?
I seconded the pulling it.
She seconded it pulling it. Richard or Nicole? Gotcha. Oh, I see. Raj Paul made a motion to amend the agenda, and then Kathy seconded that one also? Okay.
Yeah.
So let me ask a clarifying question here. If we vote yes on Nicole's motion, that means that we will not be acting on the resolution tonight?
And if
Correct. We would be able to postpone that to when we can properly notice it in accordance with our policy and still have it heard before the election.
And if we vote no on her motion, we can either act on it tonight or we cannot act on it tonight. Is that correct?
Yes.
So I'll still wait for Laura to read it so we know what we're voting on.
Board Member Raj Paul, I don't have your motion verbatim. Could you please read that?
I had said I wanted to remove Resolution 22-29 and the MOU associated with Boulder Public Libraries that are part of action item 9.4 from this meeting's agenda because it was not noticed in accordance with our board policy.
Okay. The motion is to remove Resolution 22-29 and the MOU with Boulder Public Libraries because that part of the action 9.4 was not properly noticed. Okay, I'm going to take roll call now.
I'm looking around, is that right, Nicole? Close enough?
Okay. When I document this in board docs in the minutes, I will have it verbatim. I'll just listen to the recording several times. Okay. On the motion to amend, Garcia,
No.
Gebhardt,
Yes.
Niznik,
No.
Rajpal,
Yes.
Sargent,
Yes.
Sweeney Moran,
No.
Zis.
No.
Motion did not pass. Okay, now I'm going to return to the original motion to approve the agenda as it stands. Garcia,
Yes.
Hold on, Laura, there wasn't a second for that, so we should get a second. Kitty moved and there wasn't a second.
I second.
okay. Garcia,
Yes.
Gebhardt,
No?
Niznik,
Wait, what? Tonight's agenda? Yes.
Rajpal,
No.
Sargent,
No.
Sweeney Moran,
Yes.
Zis.
Yes.
Motion passes.
So now we move on to the superintendent's report. Dr. Anderson, it's good to see you, and I'll turn the mic over to you.
Thank you, Board President Gebhardt, board members. Good to see you all this evening. Just a few updates for you and the community today. So tomorrow is Walk and Bike to School Day. I will be at Bear Creek Elementary School helping to celebrate. It's National Walk and Bike to School Day, and we hope that as many folks in our community and in our school district can find non-motorized ways to get to and from school tomorrow and every day. We know that this is a priority for us, and our Safe Route to Schools team does an incredible job, and it's such a beautiful place we live in. I think it's just a great idea to walk or bike any chance you can get. We know it's great for our students' health, sets them up for a great day of learning, plus it's better for our environment. And so I know that many schools are holding events to celebrate everyone who walks, rides, or scooters, or whatever, pogo sticks, whatever they want to do tomorrow, Walk a Bike to School Day. So we're excited for that. On October 2nd, Centaurus High School hosted Eco-tober, which is a festival to celebrate, learn about, and promote sustainability. This event's a partnership with the cities of Lafayette and Louisville, Town of Superior, and BVSD. We had dozens of exhibitors, workshops, and lots of interactive activities that were featured in this family-friendly event and helped us envision and create healthy, resilient, and sustainable communities here in Boulder County. So this rolls right into, board members, our student moment. Students were a big part of this event. This evening, we're excited to welcome some students from Centaurus High School's DECA for our student moment. They're going to speak, they're going to introduce themselves and speak about their role in this event, including the promotion of Ecotober and the All Careers Initiative. And so we have two of our Centaurus High School students, and I'll turn the floor over to them.
Hello, everyone. My name is Cameron Lavender. Hi, I'm Amy Resendez Salazar. And we are part of DECA, which is at Centaurus. I'm currently the CEO or the president of DECA, and I'm an officer this year. DECA stands for Distributive Education Clubs of America, and DECA prepares emerging leaders and entrepreneurs in marketing, finance, hospitality, and management. So with this club, it's an opportunity at our school for students to participate. There's two different classes that are held at our school. There's event communications, which deals with things like professional sports or holding concerts, things like that. And then there's an intro to entrepreneurship. So I'm currently a sophomore. I took intro to entrepreneurship last year by choice. I'm interested in being an entrepreneur in my future goals. But this year I took event marketing as that needed to be my second class because I am an officer. So it's easier for me to be associated with the new students that are coming into this class if I'm in the current enrolling class. So DECA is kind of an opportunity. It's a club in America and any student can join, but it's an opportunity for kids to learn about marketing, any kind of distributive communication, so how to interact with people, how to make eye contact, how to comfortably walk up and do things like this and talk to a room full of adults as a sophomore in high school.
Important adults.
Yes, important adults. How to dress in business attire. A lot of students don't understand what that means. They don't understand how to tie a tie. So simple things like that that are definitely important for the kids to understand going into business aspects in their future lives. It's really just a basis of how to be in a business, but it gives students an opportunity to do what they're interested in. So personally, I compete in apparel and accessories marketing. So I sell clothing. Just to kind of give you a basis of what DECA looks like, we go to different district meetings. We have state and we have regionals, and then we go on to country competitions. So DECA is in Japan, it's in other countries, and you can go pretty far. They do also do scholarships, so it's a huge deal, not only in America, but all over the world. But so when we go to these competitions, you get a role play, and you're given a job based on whatever category you're in. So like I said, I'm in apparel and accessories marketing. So I'll go in, I'll get a role play. They'll tell me what my role is on that business. So usually I'm a marketer and something affiliated with the company. And this company has hired me to market their product. Maybe they have a new branch for their store. Maybe they have new clothing, something along those lines. And I have to come up with an idea. They tell me the judge is either my boss, they created the company, they've created this new piece of clothing that they're trying to sell, and I have to come up with the best idea compared to 500 other students that I'm competing with on how to market whatever my role is given. So it's a huge opportunity. Students can be creative and they can kind of fit in wherever their strengths are in like a marketing situation. So you can do sports, you can do hospitality, tourism, anything along those lines.
Yeah, and just adding on to everything that Cameron just said, more than anything, it's just an opportunity for high school students to grow and learn a lot about themselves. For example, I took my first marketing class as a sophomore during the COVID pandemic year, and I was very closed off and I felt very disconnected from society and my friends and just the whole world in general. But having this marketing class really helped me kind of find my place and kind of explore different ideas. I ended up choosing hospitality and tourism, which was the area that I really wanted to focus on. And I learned that, maybe business is something that I want to pursue in the future. Now I'm a senior, and being able to have gone to district, and not to mention that I was also working with my teammate at the time. We made it all the way to state competition 2 years in a row. And it's very competitive. However, it is something that one can find joy in and, really be able to just enjoy the opportunity of, kind of stepping out of your comfort zone. Especially for me, I was able to benefit from this opportunity during a year that was very closed off and, the world was falling apart. However, DECA, I can say proudly that was able to help me find my area and find, who I am as a person and as a student now.
Yeah, so if we move into Ecotober, it was an event that was put on at Centaurus, and it wasn't only DECA affiliated. They also had Eco Warriors, which is another club at our school currently. And Eco Warriors meets before school on weekdays, and they talk about how they're going to bring sustainability and becoming a better green community and green school, how that starts on a kid level, on teenagers, and how to pursue that once you become an adult, and how to carry that into the school. So it's not only the kids in the club who are learning to be sustainable, but it's the kids in the club teaching their friends how to be sustainable and how do they carry that on to their future lives. So even things like you guys do, so whether it be typing on a computer instead of writing on pieces of paper, there's simple things like that we're learning how to preserve, and they're able to carry that into their future jobs. So in terms of Ecotober, DECA was affiliated. We had Eco Warriors, which I spoke before, and we also had engineering. So every year, engineering, and I actually went on this field trip last year. They take a field trip around Coal Creek. They learn the history of Coal Creek and they kind of talk about like what it meant to burn coal, like how to burn coal, how that was affiliated with Coal Creek, how those remnants are still on Coal Creek that you pass by every day and you have no idea about. So we did learn the history about that, and then we were able to understand how coal is not sustainable for our community. And then we did research projects, presentations, and slideshows in the classroom in engineering to show better ways to use energy and how we can use energy that's around us that's sustainable. So they did reach out to several different areas in our school. And as the president, when Ecotober was presented to me, I kind of had the first yes or no, I guess, on if the group would pursue this event. So I definitely said yes. There we go. The students didn't understand how DECA was affiliated with sustainability or going green at all. We're a marketing group. Pretty much everything we do is the opposite of sustainability. We are like paper writers, all this other stuff all the time. So everything we did was pretty much the opposite. But we took a huge chunk of Ecotober and we applied to what we're doing now. I mean, even our teacher, some of the different materials he uses, the different things we do to prepare for the competitions, instead of using tons of sticky notes, we're using bigger index cards, folding those in half, that's less paper, simple things like that, just learning the basis of being sustainable. So I said yes, I wanted Ecotober to be a learning opportunity for other students. I wanted them to be able to understand how they can use sustainability in everything they do. It's not only about recycling at your home or composting in your backyard, but you can use it in a business aspect. Anything that you are affiliated with, you can somehow use recycling or going green in your community and in your everyday life. And then we also kind of brought our marketing aspect, our strength, what we had into Ecotober. So we made these events that these flyers that Amy will hold up, and it presented the All Careers Contest, which was the contest that DECA was in charge of presenting at Ecotober. And the All Careers Contest was an opportunity for students to scan the QR code, and the QR code is actually the website of what the All Career Contest is, but it's an opportunity for students to present business ideas or any ideas they have at all in terms of that were business related, I guess, and how to have a situation, like for example, one of our students did solar power panels on top of traffic lights. And they did a research paper on how that saves millions of dollars in the United States alone a year. So simple things like that, which is technically a business idea. And they were able to submit their research, their ideas, and present their ideas on this careers contest. They're going to be due in March, and then the student, whoever had the best or most sustainable, would win a cash prize. But I guess our role for Ecotober was to kind of present this all careers contest to the students, give them an opportunity to use their brains and kind of think about how they're going to incorporate sustainability into something like creating a new business. So we used our marketing aspect. We actually made a TikTok that went on Warrior TV last week. We actually made another one today for our next event that we're doing at school. But we used that at Warrior TV. We presented it that way. We did these flyers. We did Warrior Weekly, which is an email that goes out to every parent that's a parent of a warrior at Centaurus. We did things like that. And so we were able to use our strength, which was marketing and what we learned. We were able to ask the students what's going to be most beneficial to have other students like you learn about this. Are you going to be looking at these flyers, or are you going to be watching Warrior TV? So we were able to incorporate DECA and our strength into Ecotober, which was the challenge we were presented with. And then we also in our school, and the business card says Centaurus High School, keeping our school clean with DECA, and then it gives a list of things to recycle, things to trash, and things to compost. So we have all of these bins in our school, and a lot of students, I wouldn't say take advantage of them, but they don't know what goes in what bin, and it's not to harm the environment, but innocently they don't understand what that means. So we were able to use kind of that loophole and incorporated what we knew and used our strengths again, which would be to create a business card, something like that, and help the students. So it's a little card and it tells you what is supposed to be trash, what's recycled, and then what's compost.
And more than anything, Ecotober was more of an opportunity to encourage all of our peers and the community to kind of just come together and learn about sustainability in the environment, as we have noticed, with climate change and all these rates skyrocketing as we're speaking. It can be very like disappointing, and kind of you're just kind of stuck and you don't know really how to help. However, showing up to an event like Ecotober is kind of the first step to educating yourself, and later on educating your peers and educating everyone around you. And just, it was very fitting that DECA was able to help promote this event, because DECA at Centaurus High School isn't, like Ecotober, that is as known just because we're known as a business club. However, there's just so much more to DECA, and with Ecotober, there was so much more to Ecotober, as it was, just an opportunity for everyone to come together, learn about the environment, and, kind of just, it's more of an event to gather the future leaders, which is future generations, so that later on we can continue to make the world a better place.
Is that it? Nope. All right, I think we're finished. So I don't know what your next step is, but if anyone has questions and you're willing to take questions, we're willing to answer your questions.
Well, that is incredible. So impressive. Thank you so much. I don't know that we have time for questions, but want to thank you both for your involvement, for your leadership at Centaurus High School, for being incredible speakers. And how about a round of applause for our amazing DECA students from Centaurus. And that concludes my superintendent's update.
We'll now proceed to the next item on our agenda, which is public participation. Members of the public who wish to speak at tonight's meeting were asked to sign up prior to noon today by submitting the request to speak during public participation form that can be found on the BVSD website, or by contacting the Board Secretary, Laura Schaefer. Public participants have the option to attend the meeting in person or join and present their comments via Google Meet. The board respects the rights of the public to speak on matters concerning the operation of the schools. We believe that public comments that are critical of district staff, however, often cause unnecessary harm to those employees and to the education of our students. As a result, we prefer that members of the public share any criticisms of employees in writing with the superintendent, who is responsible for supervising all staff, and then involving the board as necessary. If you choose instead to address a personnel issue publicly, please understand that the board does not endorse the comments of any speaker and reminds all who speak that they assume the risk of legal action by district employees in the event the affected employees believe that any comments about them violate legal standards. To ensure that our meeting is conducted in an orderly manner, we ask that persons who address the board, one, confine your comments to matters that are germane to the business of the school district. Speakers on agenda items will be heard first, followed by those speaking to non-agenda items. Limit your presentation to 2 minutes. If we go over the first hour, which we will not, public comment will continue at the end of the meeting. If you run out of time or you would like to share additional information, you may email the board. Recognize that students often attend or view our meetings. Speakers' remarks, therefore, should be suitable for an audience that includes kindergarten through 12th grade students. I may interrupt, warn, or terminate a participant's statement that is unrelated to the business of the district or inappropriate for K-12 students. This video will be recorded for public viewing in perpetuity. BVSD reserves the right to remove you from the meeting if your video includes material that is inappropriate for the public or BVSD students. You will see a yellow card when you have 30 seconds remaining. When you have 10 seconds, you will see an orange card. Please wrap up your comments. At the end of your 2 minutes, a timer will sound and your microphone will be muted. This evening, this public comment session will also serve as a public hearing for receiving comments on the Casey Middle School Unified Improvement Plan that is on our study agenda later in the evening, as the board will not be asking for public comment during the study portion of the agenda. Tonight, we will begin with speakers who are on our agenda, and I will start with Neil Fishman.
President Gebhardt, members of the board, Superintendent Anderson, and staff. I believe in the intent and spirit of the legislation that was advanced under HB 191192. And I believe adoption of Resolution 22-27 in its current form on tonight's agenda is warranted, not just because it's the right thing to do, but because the intent and the spirit of 1192 is fully in line with the BVSD vision, mission, values, and goals. Revisions to the social studies curriculum to include the social contributions of racial and ethnic groups as well as LGBTQ people is forward-looking and ultimately will better prepare the students to succeed in life and in their careers in an increasingly diverse world. Furthermore, adoption of recommendations to the standards originally proposed by the Legislatively Mandate Commission will benefit not just students, but their families as well. And under these new standards, teachers and educators will be more confident that the district will have their backs when implementing the revised curriculum. So I appreciate your willingness to advance Resolution 22-27 to a vote, and am pleased that the draft resolution in tonight's agenda is more inclusive of underrepresented groups. And so I just want to close by again saying thank you for your work on this effort, and to wish you all a National Happy Coming Out Day.
Thank you. The next person is Glenda Russell.
Good evening. I am a mother and grandmother of BVSD graduates, and I also am a psychologist. Some may not understand why you have taken the stand that you have with respect to HB 191192. I just want to tell you one story very quickly. It's a true story. Several years ago, I attended an education conference in Colorado. At one of the breaks, I was talking with a teacher from BVSD. A young man, he was probably in his mid-20s or so, approached her saying he needed to tell her something. He said he had been her student at Southern Hills School. During his time there, he realized he was gay. He was freaking out at the time about that. He told only one other person in the world at the time that he was gay, and that was his twin brother. And then his twin brother was also freaking out about that, wondering what his brother's future might look like. This young man went on to say that there was one thing that helped both of them as they were trying to deal with the fact that one of them was gay. It was a photo that this teacher had it was a poster that this teacher had in the classroom, and the classroom had various photos of different family constellations, including apparently a same-sex headed household. And it had the poster had words to the effect that families come in all shapes and sizes, or something like that. This young man told his ex-teacher that at the time, the poster in that classroom was the only positive thing he or his brother knew in the whole world about being gay. And they told each other that Miss Thompson would not have had that poster up if she thought being gay was as bad as that they had been led to believe by other people in their lives. That poster provided a lifeline to these two boys. That is what visibility sometimes can do. It is sometimes really just that simple. Your support for the intent behind HB 19192 will send a lifeline to all sorts of students in this district and beyond. Thank you for doing that.
Thank you. Next we have Paolo Robledo, who's been given 2 minutes by Carlos Medina Ocelli.
Push right. Hi, I'm Paola. I'm the mom of 3 boys at Eisenhower. I'm very happy to be here because I'm aware of, I'm very happy to be here because I wanted to open the awareness and the consciousness about the usage of screens. So first, I would like to start with some questions that I think parents and teachers and educators, we should have it on mind. How much time are our kids are spending on screens? Is this amount of time is healthy for our cognitive and emotional and our health brain? Are we taking, no, not taking, are we talking about the pros and cons with our kids, teachers, and parents? Are we a good example, like parents also and like teachers? Are we given the space to our kids to have their downtimes and to have their space to have self-awareness? At school and at home, are we setting limits on how to spend time on screens? It is easy for us and for kids to self-regulate after time on the screens. And are we encouraging face-to-face communications? Well, and I can go on and on and on. These were some questions that they were on my head. So with these questions, I want to encourage parents and teachers and educators. That's why I came here, to be the leaders to guide our kids to have a better usage of screens. Because I know that technology is very good and we are very happy, and me, like you here, I'm Mexican and all my family is in Mexico, and I'm very happy to have technology. But I think in this moment, in this moment is critical, because it's the moment that us as parents and schools, we have to set boundaries and to help each other, so the kids are more aware of the usage of screens. I set some ideas that maybe you can take as a board. One of them is to create areas on the schools to be screen-free, so that kids, they don't feel left out if they don't have a gadget or whatever. Or also you are encouraging face-to-face communications. Also, I think it's very important to enforce the mindfulness education. I think it's in your social emotional studies and with the counselors, but I think it has to be more enforced, and more, I think mindfulness should be a key in our schools, because to have a very healthy brain and relationships, because we think that the gadgets or the devices, they are connecting, but like step a little bit out and think if it's really connecting or disconnecting. So my conclusion is that together as parents and teachers and schools, we should transmit this to our kids by putting our examples and setting guidelines. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Steve Gibson. Is Steve remote, Laura? Because I don't have that on my... I will come back to Steve in case he gets here before the end of public participation. So next we will move on to James Bush.
Good evening. I wish I'd had an opportunity to meet with those two young women. I'd be more confident in speaking to all of you. So I wrote my remarks down. This is fairly mundane. My name is James Bush. I live at 1785 Gillespie Drive in South Boulder. I'm here to ask the school board to take action to eliminate the attractive nuisance that the Fairview High School senior parking lot has become. I have lived across from the senior parking lot on Gillespie Drive for 30 years. My son went all the way through the Boulder Valley School District, from Mesa Elementary through Fairview High School, graduated from CU, lives in Europe now. So The school district does a good job. The peace of the surrounding neighborhood is regularly shattered and disrupted by young people using the unsecured parking lot after hours to race cars, blast loud music, rev engines, and speed in and out of the parking lot and around the surrounding neighborhood. I have called the police uncounted times to report loud music, extreme engine noises, screeching tires, and dangerous, reckless, and careless driving around and around the parking lot, out onto the bordering streets, and back into the parking lot. Extreme events typically occur after dark on weeknights and as late as 2 a.m. on weekends, holidays, and during the fall, winter, spring, and summer breaks. Most recently, 2 large explosions, yes, extremely loud blasts, occurred on Friday night, September 30th. I've seen cars that were parked on the street struck and damaged by reckless driving, and have had damage occur to my own property. I am asking the school board to install 2 locking gates, one on each motor vehicle access point, in order to assert responsible management of this parking lot for the benefit of all stakeholders who care about Fairview High School and the neighborhood it is a part of. I estimate this would entail installation of 4 metal posts, 2 swinging metal gates, 2 heavy-duty identical combination padlocks, and necessary ancillary hardware and fittings. Such gates are currently installed at places in the parking lots at Boulder High School. Thank you for your attention. Hey, good. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Cindy Warren, who's been given 2 minutes by Joe Prizio.
I'm Dr. Cindy Warren, a retired pathologist who lives near the proposed modular factory site. The proposed site is in close proximity to 2 residential neighborhoods. It is directly across a small neighborhood street from homes in the Regalia Hills area, and it is less than 500 yards from homes in the reserve subdivision. Although we are all in favor of affordable housing and modular homes, many of us don't support a factory in our neighborhood. The factory was approved by BVSD at their meeting on August 23rd as part of a consent agenda. I read the description and justification of the annexation agreement between the city and BVSD, and I have watched the video of the school board meeting. There was minimal discussion of the factory at the meeting, and there was no mention of the impact of the factory on the adjacent residential neighborhoods in either the consent agenda document or at the school board meeting. Of note, it was stated at the school board meeting that plans for the factory were 75 to 90% completed. However, neighbors were not made aware of the factory until late September, and then only neighbors in closest proximity to the factory were notified. Neighbors have numerous issues with placing a factory at this site. Number 1, size and appearance. Although the factory is described as small in the consent agreement, it is not small. It is 250 feet long and 125 feet wide, almost as large as a football field. And it is being constructed of metal. It will be very unsightly. I'm sure few people would like to look out their window or front door and see a large metal factory. And obviously, home values and resale values will sharply decline. Number 2, noise. As described in the Affordable Housing Modular Factory document, the factory will be making all the components of a home. There will be forklifts with backup alarms, air compressors, pneumatic nail guns, hammering and sawing with power equipment, etc. It will be very loud. Yet, according to information provided by the senior manager at the September 29th neighborhood meeting, no sound engineers involved in the project, which is shocking. In the project question and answers document, there is mention of using insulation and keeping the doors shut when possible, but I hardly think this suffices to control extreme levels of noise associated with a factory in a residential area, and the factory plans to operate on Saturdays. Additionally, there will be large trucks transporting building materials and large trailers transporting home components to and from the factory. These will all have backup alarms. The current plans show the trucks and trailers will be using 63rd Street, although this is a 2-lane street which literally abuts a small trailer park and is in close proximity to the affected residential areas. Arapahoe Road, which routinely carries large vehicular traffic and has a direct entrance into the school area, is not slated to be utilized. Finally, there's the issue of construction waste and disposal of the waste. According to the senior manager, the exact mechanics of how this will be handled haven't been addressed. However, it will likely also be a very loud process. Number 3, location. Although it's certainly convenient to have the factory adjacent to the school, there are other non-residential sites in which the factory could be located. The school district certainly has the knowledge and resources to transport students from point A to point B. If the issue is annexation, I'm sure there are alternatives to a factory. Number 4, documents. As mentioned earlier, we have had essentially no time to review legal documents, including the annexation agreement itself. We also haven't been provided with the environmental assessment study. We need access to pertinent documents and time to review them. The affected neighbors are good citizens who pay taxes and have a great deal of financial and emotional investment in our homes. Many of us don't think we've been considered in your decision to build in our midst and haven't accepted the presence of a factory next door. However, if the factory is built, the school district and city will hopefully make significant changes such as postpone the construction date to provide time for document review, change the appearance of the factory to approximate that of the school, employ a sound engineer and make every possible adjustment to decrease the amount of sound emitted from the factory. Build a sizable and aesthetically pleasing noise reduction fence, barrier, or embankment around the factory to mitigate noise, and place evergreens on the opposite side of the fence or barrier to mitigate noise and appearance. Have trucks and trailers use Arapahoe, not 63rd. Minimize the use and volume of backup alarms. Consider noise when making decisions about waste disposal. Do not allow the factory to operate on Saturday. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next, we have our only virtual, Emma Ruhotsky.
Hello, thank you. My name is Emma Rahotsky. I'm a parent of 4 kids at 3 BVSD schools this year. This is both our 10th year in the district and our 10th year at our beloved Eisenhower Elementary. At Ike, we have felt supported wholeheartedly by our principal, Brady Stroop, as we tried to navigate advanced math pathways for our children. Unfortunately, this year my son is one of 5 boys receiving the short end of the stick in his education. Due to COVID and associated scheduling constraints, this group took an unusual cadence through math. We were told just days before school started that our son could not attend 7th grade math at Southern Hills as we'd planned and would need to do BU online or be homeschooled. My son's 7th grade math group is unique in the BU system for 2 reasons. First, they are receiving 100 minutes less of instruction per week than other 5th graders who are getting instruction in person, and 40 minutes less of instruction per week than other 5th graders who are getting online 6th grade math. Second, their math class completely overlaps with social studies. The district surely cannot expect students to receive thousands of minutes less of math instruction this year and no social studies instruction at all. This does not represent equitable educational opportunities for this group. For this unusual group, I request that the district hire a 0.1 FTE to teach 7th grade math to them in person, 4 days a week during math time. While there is always a funding shortage and a teaching shortage, these 5 boys deserve social studies instruction and more math instruction than they are currently receiving. This would be a one-time expense for the district and would result in these children not missing another core subject or missing the chance to keep their passion and confidence in math. They too deserve challenging, meaningful, and engaging learning opportunities in social studies and mathematics. I look forward to the opportunity to collaborate in any way necessary to make my request a reality. Thank you.
Thank you. And I don't believe I've seen anyone come in. Steve Gibson, last chance. And Laura, you haven't heard? I have not heard.
He responded that he was going to attend in person. So,
Okay, so we'll move on then. So this ends our public participation. We appreciate hearing from the speakers this evening, and now we will move on to board communication. Board members who'd like to go first? Beth?
So I wanted to take this opportunity to respond to last meeting regarding a lot of the accelerated math pathways conversations that we had, as well as tonight's speaker with the situation at Eisenhower. Wanted to share with the board that since we last met, I've been able to meet one-on-one with several of our elementary school parents, parents from Eisenhower, Douglas, Coal Creek, and I really just started by asking them, tell me your story. I told them very intentionally, I can't promise you anything, but I really want to listen to you and just hear what they've had to say. And I've had the chance to meet with our district leadership as well. It's a really nuanced and complicated situation, as you will not be shocked to find. You know, we're in a climate of declining enrollment, and I think we're working with really quite limited resources. Many of the concerns center around online instruction for our students, where we previously had in-person math instruction. Ultimately, I think as a district, we need to rethink how we accelerate our students. And I'm actually really hopeful that we'll be able to continue to best meet our students' needs in that regard. I know we're working to solve concerns for this year and also to inform our steps in the future. So I honestly believe, and I told all the parents this, that the district and the parents want the same thing. We all want meaningful and rigorous instruction for all of our students. And I know that we're actively working to make adjustments this year within the resources we have. And I also know that we're going to be working as a district on our math pathways, and we'll be getting more information about that later this year. So I just look forward to that information. And that's all I wanted to say about accelerated math pathways.
Richard?
I want to thank all the speakers that were here tonight. And I also want to commend our youth equity group. We met with them tonight, and when I sat around that table with these young people, I was so impressed with their understanding as it relates to equity. It seemed to me like they have a better understanding that some adults have around equity. And I truly appreciate their comments and the way they form their little subgroups in terms of equity areas that they want to talk about. I also intend to pull the resolution concerning our LGBTQ plus students from the consent agenda, only because I think it's such an important issue that it needs to be read out loud at our school board meeting. That's all.
Kitty?
Yes, I want to thank everybody who spoke too. And I always love being with our students, seeing what they're doing, hearing what they're saying. The two leaders from the DECA group were just wonderful to hear. And I really enjoyed hearing from the Youth Equity Council. And last weekend, I was at an event in Superior, and it was an arts event, which is called plein air, which is French, and it just means painting outside. And there were several students from Monarch who were there, from both Monarchs actually, who were there just volunteering to help, just to help out in the community. So I was really pleased to see them. It was fun to talk to them. I was able to get pictures of them and send them to Randy so we can give them, kudos for all the work they're doing. And then last night I was at the Superior Town Council meeting, and 2 troops of Girl Scouts spoke. Yeah, Rob is smiling because he was there too. And I don't know for a fact that they all go to our schools, but I'm going to guess that at least most of them do. And these Girl Scouts had spent 2 years researching how to save energy and how to conserve water, and each one of them spoke in front of the town council. And oh, I thought you said school. And I say, no, it was the town council. And the youngest one appeared to be maybe 8 or 9, I don't know, and then up to teenagers. But they were so articulate and so passionate and had such good ideas that I never cease to be impressed by our students and what they can do.
Lisa?
Yeah, a few things. I want to thank the Youth Equity Council for joining us tonight and for sharing their innovative ideas and asking us to make commitments to equity and progress for which they can hold us accountable. I want to mention that I had a wonderful time at the Out Boulder Gala on Saturday, and I really appreciate the regular partnership that Out Boulder offers us, our students, our families, and our staff. It was wonderful to listen to Governor Polis talk about his commitment and experiences and to celebrate the incredible work that folks across Boulder have done. And in that vein, I want to note again the great advocacy that Marty Moore and Neil Fishman and other folks across the community have given to advance our resolution in support for inclusion of BIPOC and LGBTQ representation in curriculum and standards. So thank you. I'm also very excited for Bike Walk and Roll Day. My family sold our car 6 months ago, so we have been transporting ourselves everywhere by foot and by bike since. Bike Walk Roll Day is a great way to celebrate what our schools could look like if we had transportation infrastructure that was more friendly to car-free families. And I look forward to finding more ways for us to advocate for protected bike lanes, bike and walk-friendly intersections, and improved greenways in an effort to create stronger and healthier schools and neighborhoods. And then finally, I want to wish a happy belated birthday to Richard Garcia and also wish all our BBSD family a happy coming out day.
Stacy, do you have anything? I just have two quick things. Last week, or a couple weeks ago, Stacy and I attended the Region 5 CASB meeting, and I just want the board to know it's not just for CASB board members, it's for all board members. So in the future, I would encourage you to attend. It's a great way to connect with other school board members in our region, to find out what's going on with CASB, to become a little more engaged. So we aren't going to have another one till next fall, but remember, next fall when that rolls around, if you can make it on your calendar to try to go, because I think it'll be great. We have the upcoming delegate assembly for CASB. Kitty's our delegate, but everyone is invited to attend, and only Kitty can vote, but others can speak, and we have some very important measures coming forward, including changing the composition of the CASB board and dropping out of NSBA and some other issues that I think people should be paying attention to. So I'm happy to answer any questions that anybody has about that, but the delegate assembly, I love the delegate assembly because it's really democracy in action. Kathleen's smiling because I do this every year, but everybody gets to talk, everybody gets one vote. And it's how we set how we're going to go forward at CASB for the year. And so if you haven't been, it's a little like paint drying on a wall when you're not a delegate, but it's actually could be really interesting this year because of some of the issues. So, and thank you to all of you for the resolutions that you've helped put forward, and we'll report back and let you know if those actually passed around the charter schools. So. And then I just want to say to the two students who came and spoke with us, one of them said that they want to make the world a better place, and I have no doubt that with students with that caliber and that energy and that passion, that our world is in very good hands, and it's always really encouraging to hear from them. I'm sorry they had to leave, but I understand why they did, because again, paint drying analogy, the board for them when they've got homework and such exciting work is what they're already doing. I don't blame them for heading back home to do their studies or whatever they were doing tonight. So thank you to all of them. Thank you to Randy Barber behind the Magic Curtain, who helps coordinate all of the student activities. It's been a really welcome addition, and I'm really thankful for all the hard work that he's doing and going out and scouting out and finding out what our students are doing, because he was already working 180 hours a week, and he's just added that, effortlessly to his list of jobs. And so I'm quite thankful for that work, because I look around the board table when we have the students, and there's not a frown anywhere in the room when they start talking. So looking forward to the next student presentations as we go forward, because I think it's a welcome addition and kind of, I think, why we're all here. So I think that concludes board participation, unless there's anything else tonight.
Yeah, Kathy, I just want to wish Lisa a happy birthday, belated. Happy birthday, Lisa.
All right, now that concludes board participation or communication. So we'll move on to information. Our first information item, I'm going to turn over to you, Rob, to do the introductions.
Thank you, Board President Gephardt. It's my honor to welcome our Assistant Superintendent of Human Resources, Dr. James Hill, up to give the board and the community an update on this past year's hiring season, specifically around our strategic plan metric of hiring a higher percentage of educators of color. And then Dr. Hill is going to speak to you all a little bit about some of the pathways work that he has been streamlining and identifying as we think about future years and making sure that we start to begin to close that gap that we know is important to us and important to our students. So with that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Hill.
Good evening, President Gebhardt, members of the board, Dr. Anderson. Tonight I'm here to share with you results from our past hiring season as it pertains to attracting, hiring, and retaining our teachers of color. I will also update you on the work being done to develop our current students and education support professionals of color to one day become teachers within our district.
Dr. Hill, would you be all right if we called a 5-minute break? Okay. I think we are back in meeting, and I am going to turn it over to you now. Dr. Hill, take it away.
Okay, all right, we'll try this again. Good evening, President Gebhardt, members of the board, Dr. Anderson. Tonight I'm here to share results from the spring hiring season as it pertains to attracting, hiring, and retaining teachers of color. I will also update you on the work being done to develop our current students and education support professionals of color to one day become teachers within our district. Of course, we ground ourselves in the work of our strategic plan, where this presentation falls under the strategic theme of positive and inclusive culture, measured by the metrics to reduce disproportionality, teachers, leaders of color. The data that I'm going to share with you this evening will reflect our hiring numbers this year and how it compares to the past 4 years. Starting with this year's data. As of August 29th, we have hired a total of 273 teachers, with 37 of those teachers identifying as a person of color. Percentage-wise, that's 13%. Now, we used the August 29 data since at that time, all teaching positions that were posted had official job offers out to potential candidates. So comparing this year's data to the previous years, starting in 2018, here's a few things that stand out. 2021-22 was the largest number of teachers of color we hired in the past 4 years. We also held our first annual large-scale Teacher of Color hiring event in February. Although we had to move the event to virtual, we had over 50 candidates participate. It's also important to point out the data from the 2021-22 school year represents almost 100 more total hires than we had this year. This could be a direct reflection of our teacher shortage. In 2020-2021, we saw an overall fewer total numbers of hires in our Unit B employees, which could be credited to the beginning of the pandemic and people's hesitation to retire or seek other employment opportunities. I believe in increasing the number of teachers of color we hire will require us to determine our staffing projections earlier, which will dictate our recruiting strategies. In summary, here are some highlights from the past hiring season and work that is happening this fall. So some of the highlights. Even though we faced many challenges with the pandemic and nationwide teacher shortage, we still maintained our focus on increasing diversity through our hiring process. We increased the number of teachers of color we hired a year after the pandemic began. We continue to set up and monitor systems that support and retain our top talent, which I'll talk about some of those systems. And despite challenges from the pandemic, as I mentioned, we hosted a large-scale Teacher of Color hiring event in February. Of course, there's some opportunities for growth and progression. So some of those opportunities are increasing the number of teachers of color we hire each year. That's just the foundation of it. We understand how important it is for our students of color to see teachers in the classroom that look like them and they can relate to their experiences. These teachers also serve as advocates and role models for our students. Overall, having a diverse teaching staff is good for all students. We continue to evaluate our practices to ensure we address biases within our hiring and selection process. We also continue to improve on our hiring events. We definitely identified some areas that we can improve on, and these are already being addressed. And finally, we are hoping to post positions and hire earlier in the spring. So attracting and retaining teachers of color often comes in the form of how established support systems are for our employees. This year, under the leadership of Dr. Amy Nelson, we are expanding our support for educators of color. We will continue to have events and meetings as a larger affinity group for all employees of color, no matter their role in the district, which this year we had over 200 current employees opting in so far. In addition to our larger affinity group, employees have requested these groups listed on the slide, which we will be implementing this year. Within these affinity groups, we will also be setting up a system where our teachers of color can reach out to a colleague for immediate support when needed. I can tell you, it can feel pretty isolating being the only teacher of color in a building. So having this set up for our teachers would be a tremendous asset for our employees. We also want to provide pathways for our employees to advance as leaders of color. So we are paying for employees to participate in the case Leadership, Equity, and Diversity program. We also had 45 BVSD employees attend the CU Teachers of Color and Allies Conference this last month, with 6 BVSD teachers leading sessions. Our aspiring leaders of color cohort and some tuition reimbursement that we offer for employees seeking advanced degrees are other ways we see as attracting and retaining our teachers of color. Of course, there's some great community resources with people within these communities who bring lived experiences and can relate to our teachers of color that we'll be also tapping into for support. Some of these include our CU Teachers of Colors and Allies, El Paso, the Equity Council, and the NAACP. Over the past few years, we have also been a lot more active in recruiting by establishing recruiting objectives and targeting schools with larger diversity pools in their educational programs. Our recruitment team is made up of BVEA leadership. Partnering with our teacher union on recruitment is a tremendous asset for us. Central administration, teachers, which is probably our best recruiters when it comes to recruiting teachers of color, building administrators, and then our talent acquisition team within our HR department. As I mentioned, we are a lot more strategic when it comes to attending job fairs. While looking at employment trends and projections, our recruitment team attended 20+ recruitment events, both in person and virtually, from California to New York. We are also planning on hosting our second annual Teacher of Color hiring event this spring, with some improvement on areas we identified from last year. We will still have a team active in attending other diversity conferences and job fairs, highlighting the unique features and opportunities that come with working in BVSD. With the nationwide teacher shortage and school districts competing for the same candidates, it's really time to start thinking outside the box. So this fall, we are working to create a pipeline for our students and education support professionals, specifically of color, to become employees in BVSD. Many times through these pipelines, you find your ideal candidates. Part of creating a successful pipeline is ensuring that we create support systems for current and future staff members of color, which I shared with you earlier some of the supports that are currently in place. A clear and concise pathway for BVSD students and education support professionals to become BVSD students or teachers. Partnership with local universities, tapping into student teachers and interns. Our alternative teachers licensure prep program. And developing partnership with Hispanic serving institutions and historically black colleges and universities. Heading into the spring season, we are committed to these initiatives. So we need to increase the diversity in our candidate pools. This will also reflect how successful we are with recruiting. Creating optional pathways for upward mobility and professional growth for staff of color. So we have education support professionals of color, such as paras, who are interested in becoming teachers, and we have teachers of color interested in becoming administrators. This will help with recruiting when candidates can see their potential to grow within the district. Continue to foster support systems for current and future staff members of color and monitor how effective these supports are. Again, a fully developed pathway for BVSD students of color to become BVSD teachers. And finally, enhance and increase mentoring for our teachers and administrators of color. I'll be happy to take any questions.
So, thank you for that presentation, Dr. Hill. How do you all determine where to go to recruitment fairs? I mean, you put some universities you went to, but obviously you can't go everywhere. So, what criteria do you use to make that decision?
So we really do research on their educational programs they have, and we look at diversity within those programs. I'll give you an example. I know the University of Michigan was a big one that we would like to go to because they had a large number of diverse candidates. As a matter of fact, when I was a principal, I was actually going to go to the University of Michigan, and then something called COVID hit. So that's what we do. We kind of do research, we look, and then we try to strategically go to those places.
Thank you.
Is that all, Kitty? Okay, Nicole?
Thanks for that presentation. I have two questions. The first is, do we have targets or goals for the percentage year over year of teachers of color that we were able to hire, and we do hire, and similar for our retainment? Do we have established targets, or the more the better?
So we don't, the more the better, okay? One of the things when I talked about setting our recruiting objectives and really looking at, the staffing projections, that's something that we want to start doing because we want to be strategic in where we go, looking at those projections, and realistically, even though teacher shortage, we're losing enrollment, we want to make sure that we're still strategic in how many, and that shouldn't be a reason why we stop going, but we want to be strategic when we go. So we haven't set them yet moving forward, but that's part of the plan that our team is working on to see what makes sense,
Thanks for that. And then my second question was, twice you referred to our current pathways to get BVSD students into teaching careers. We had the opportunity as board members last year to visit the variety of high schools that we have that provide pathways to teaching under a variety of titles. And the programs were different in each school. So as part of that process, streamlining and clearing up some of those pathways, or how do they individually, if they're not more uniform, work towards that goal? Or how are we modifying them to help achieve that goal very strategically?
I think that's part of the work. I think, evaluating those programs now, enhancing, improving, and really creating, when I say true pathways, meaning, we have a plan. Once you get into these programs and you move through these programs, you will be employees within a district. So, I mean, there are, quite a few, but streamlining and enhancing will benefit the whole programs.
Thanks.
Dr. Hill, or if you prefer, I'll call you James.
Whatever you like.
Thanks for the presentation. It was good information. A couple of things. Maybe in the future we'll be listening or hearing from you again as it relates to the percentage, not just overall POC, but the percentage of Latino teachers, the percentage of Latino bilingual teachers, the percentage of Asian teachers, disaggregated like that. Because, as you know, the Latino population or student population is the largest population. And then when you look at the parity, if we do have parity between Latino teachers and the Latino population, which I don't believe we do at the moment, based on the percentages, I'd like to see us with a goal in terms of how quickly we can reach parity as it relates to the ratio and proportion of teachers of color or Latino teachers and the student population. And maybe in the future we can have that. I'm not sure where you're at with thinking about that. Just a quick clarification on the community support groups that you mentioned on your slide presentation. Maybe you didn't know this or not. El Paso has dissolved, so we no longer have an El Paso organization in Boulder County. We do have the Colorado Statewide Parent Coalition that absorbed all of the El Paso activities. Okay, so just for your information on that. And then another one, which I know it's not part of the presentation here tonight, but I'd like to ask the question, since we're going to be talking about our resolution supporting BIPOC and LGBTQ plus students in our district. I would like to ask the question as it relates to what are we doing in our district to create a more welcoming environment to recruit, without having to ask, are you or not, LGBTQ staff members? Is there anything in the pipeline around that in your thinking? Because I think it's critical that we also include our LGBTQ plus community as part of our staff in our district. Who knows how many LGBTQ students we have in our district? I don't have any information on that, but I'm sure there's quite a few. And I'm thinking that if we had something that would have the appearance that we do welcome, in terms of the hiring and even the retention of LGBTQ plus staff people. Those are just a few questions that I have. But thank you for your presentation. It's great.
Thank you. So, no, I agree with you 100%. And I think that, tapping in to our LGBTQ community and our teachers and our students and involving them in conversations around, what they need as far as feeling welcomed, not us saying, hey, this is something that, you need, or because there's authentic experiences that, all of these groups go through. So I think empowering and allowing those conversations collaboratively to happen with those different groups, then we certainly can definitely make that happen. And I think it's important. There's some basic components of things you can do to make people feel welcome, but then there's other things that are really encompassed with that group that they're going to need. There may be some things that an African American student or employee may be seeing, may be feeling that they would need, to feel welcome, that one of our other groups, are not seeing. So we want to make sure that we're addressing all those. And the way you do that is have those conversations with those groups.
Well, thanks again. I stand as a resource also to you, and I'm sure that Out Boulder would be a great resource to have when you start thinking about that. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Beth?
Thank you so much for the presentation. Just a quick question. I got a little bit curious around what are the pathways like? What's our relationship like with CU? Tonight at the Youth Equity Council dinner, it's funny, they brought up this exact topic. They had a lot of questions about the pathways that we have and our partnership with CU. So if you could just tell me a bit more, I'd appreciate it.
I'm sorry, can you repeat your question again? I'm sorry.
Could I what?
Could you repeat your question again?
Sure. I'm wanting to know a little bit more about our partnership with CU and how we're supporting that pipeline to get teachers into our schools.
So we receive several a year student teachers and interns. We get tutors that we tap into the School of Ed from CU. Again, I know as a principal, each year we had several student teachers and teachers welcoming those student teachers in. We would have interns. We'd have students that are thinking about going into education, who was part of CU's education department, come and tutor and mentor and do those type of things with our students. So pretty solid partnership. However, when it comes to the pathways, those are the parts that we need to continue to grow on. Those are the parts where we really need to get a streamlined, established program where each year we are getting teachers out of that program. We don't have that yet, and that's why we want to grow that partnership with that pathways piece. Because there's no reason why, a student teacher from CU that's in our buildings should seek other districts for employment, So we're trying to lock CU down, if you will.
I have two questions for you. First, I appreciate you talking about the opportunities for growth and strategies for attracting more teachers and recruitment strategies. And I think we all have some idea about the different challenges you face, and we've certainly talked to Mike about it for years. But it's really exciting to have you and your new perspective and your new energy in the role. So my first question is just, what do you see as the biggest challenges that you're facing, and is there anything additional we can do to support you?
I think the biggest challenge is going to be when we look to grow our teachers of color in this district. I think really having these employees and community, really embrace and welcome them in, and just not supporting them just from day one. I mean, just supporting them through all aspects of their work, when they leave work, checking in on them often, and because it is difficult. Boulder is a wonderful, wonderful community. It really is, but it's not as wonderful for some people. So when you have to work here and when you have challenges from parent communities and you have challenges from, sometimes colleagues, when you face these challenges, and oh, by the way, education is getting more difficult by the day. That's a lot to take on. So I think, not only the people that, of color, that's a tremendous support group to have. But just really finding resources from everywhere. So when we bring these people in and talk about how wonderful our school district is, we talk about how wonderful our city is, then they really see it. It's just not a sales pitch. Because what will happen is they'll be here, they'll see, and then they'll leave. And that's just that retaining piece. It's one thing to get them here, but it's really one thing to keep them. And if we can start keeping our teachers of color when we bring them here, then word's going to get out. So thanks for asking that, though.
Thank you so much for that answer. And then my other question is, do we have any kind of monetary support or otherwise for teachers who want to pursue additional master's or PhD programs while they're part of our staff?
So one of the things I mentioned was there is some tuition reimbursement, that's offered. And there are some programs that we're looking into to see if we can do more, because right now, honestly, the tuition reimbursement is, it still costs a lot even with that reimbursement. So just looking, those are things that, I'm excited to be in this position because these are things I can look into, these are things I can research, and these are new things I can bring to the table.
But that is reimbursement, you're saying, for anyone, like if we have a current teacher who's a qualified teacher who wants to advance their education, the tuition reimbursement is for that as well, not just for folks who are
right. There's
wonderful.
some of
Thank
that.
you so much.
There's some tuition reimbursement that goes with it. So
thank you so much, Dr. Hill.
thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Hill. I have a couple quick questions. Do we keep statistics on how many teachers we lose in the first couple years?
I can find that out.
And do we know why they leave? Do we kind of keep track of, is it conditions? Is it, salary? Is it, things, kind of two categories, things we can address, things we don't have any control over. Do we track that at all?
Not to my knowledge, but I can just tell you some of the things I hear why they leave, and you named two of them. But no, I can dig a little deeper and find that out. But some of it is not so much of salary, but a lot of it is like we said, unfortunately, they'll get here, and they find that the conditions are not what they thought it would be. It's not cheap to live in Boulder as well, and so, but without me really digging deep and us, really, I can't give you a straight answer on that.
No, that's fine. I was just thinking if we could identify some of that, we might start to make a little bit of a dent in the retaining part too, if we could figure out why people are leaving. I remember, Rob, a couple of years ago that Bill gave us a presentation of kind of where our teacher workforce was in age and how many were going to be retiring or reaching retirement age, and kind of, it was a really helpful snapshot. I'm hoping at some point we can look at that again, because I get the sense, we keep hearing about this looming, like all the teachers are going to be retiring, and I don't see people clamoring to take on a teaching profession. So I was just putting a pin in that, because I thought that was really helpful information to have at some point. You probably have that too, Dr. Hill, I would think, somewhere.
Yeah. So one thing I can say, just kind of getting back to Richard, what you were saying about the bilingual and, looking at some of our hard to fill positions. And I know it seems like everything is like hard to fill right now, but there are really some jobs, teaching jobs, that are hard to fill. Some of those that I'm working with BVEA leadership on, with some incentives, and some of that has some salary implications to it, and making those jobs a lot more attractive when we're going out and recruiting these employees. We can offer them some incentives to come working here. So we're currently working on that now, and I can tell you, some of our bilingual positions that are required, fits those categories.
And can you talk a little about the alternative licensure program? Who runs it? Do we keep track of whether teachers who go through that are more or less have fewer concerns as they progress? Who's running it, and how do we know if it's actually leading to the results that we want in highly qualified certified teachers?
So what I can tell you, my understanding of it to this point is, this is a program with CDE. We haven't done a lot of that, in our district, as far as really full scale, bringing teachers in, because we haven't had to. But when you start talking about being creative now, those are one of the programs that we are, really actively looking into and finding ways to implement it here within our district. So, I can tell you what I know about it is, you get in this program with support. The teachers going in there, they'll be working towards their teaching license. Okay, the school district will, in order to get in the program, you have to find a school district that hires you, they place you, you're supported, you're getting a salary while you're working towards this with support, and then once you complete the program, then you're employed in that school district. So again, there's different modifications of that, so that's something that we're looking into now.
I think PEBC has some partnerships like that as well, that try to help support students so
Right.
that they actually get a salary while they're teaching, because
Right.
otherwise you have to student teach and have no income, and that can be a huge burden for
Right.
for
And
a
the
lot
great
of
thing
our
about it,
students.
they're supported. I mean, they the program brings in support for them. So.
And I know you said you're trying to support the teachers through support systems by checking in. Are there other ways you can support these teachers who are coming into the district? You said they're work-alike groups, so do they get time off to meet, or is it on their own time? What does that look like? How are we supporting those teachers?
Well, it can look several ways, but, one of the things that, just, speaking with, some of our teachers, if I'm, I'll use me, if I'm the only black teacher in a building, and, I'm running into certain issues, they're supporting my building. I mean, but, sometimes, support is like, I don't know how to support you because I'm not experiencing that. Okay, or I don't know how to support you because, I don't know how to respond to that. It would be great, where I know I have a colleague, maybe not in the same building, but somewhere in the district, where I can pick up the phone and explain or looking for guidance on that and be able to say, yeah, I dealt with that 2 weeks ago. This is what you should do. Or just have someone to speak with. So I don't want it to seem like there's no support for these people, but the support comes in different forms and it looks different. And sometimes in order for someone to understand what I'm going through, they'll have to walk in my shoes and see that. And that's where that authentic support and advice can come from.
And what's encouraging is what I hear you saying, Dr. Hill, is that sometimes those support systems are outside the chain of review and command so that they can get the kind of support they need and not feel like they can't ask for fear of having it show up on a review. So that seems really
Absolutely.
positive.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thank you for, okay, Richard has something.
Just a quick follow-up on the student pathways that we had an opportunity to go and observe at Broomfield High, Centaurus, and also at Boulder High. When you talk about fully developed pathways for BVSD students of color to become BVSD teachers, fully developed pathways, can you explain a little bit in terms of what you mean by that?
Well, all those programs you mentioned, they're great programs, right? But what I'm saying is, as they're going through those, is there somehow incentives or are we partner with colleges? So, are they earning some type of credits or higher ed credits so, they can just, right then transition into, let's say CU, School of Ed, and start working on them. Sometimes even, after a certain amount of years, be hired and with that support. So I'm talking about fully developed, meaning not just in high school and saying, you like that, now, go on your own and enroll in college and get into a program. Is there a way that, they can continue being in a high school program and transition right into a college program? Mm-hmm. That's what I mean by fully developed.
Well, thank you for that answer. And I don't mean to compare ourselves with our neighbor, which is north of us, but they have that P-Teach program. And what I read in the newspaper, I don't know whether it was a week ago or 2 weeks ago, I can't recall. But I also read where someone from the district said that those kids that get through the P-Teach program are guaranteed a job with Longmont or St. Vrain once they get through it. Is that what we're talking about in terms of fully developing programs?
That's beautiful. One day, who knows, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, who knows?
Yeah, because I'm real curious to see, because I know that I've spoken also with our esteemed superintendent here regarding a dual enrollment program, whether it be at Front Range Community College or what, where our kids would leave high school with a 2-year degree, and why not do a pathway for teachers in that area. And I'm hoping that we're still going to continue thinking about that, because I think that we have the makings already, because you do have 3 high schools with pathways already in place that could very easily turn into that. And then, they'll have 2 years under their belt, another 2 years, they'll get a degree, or maybe even get them into the alternative, whatever,
Licensure.
yeah,
Yeah.
ideas. Thank you.
Great ideas. Thank you.
Anything else, board members? Rob, anything else?
I just want to thank Dr. Hill for his work. Board members, as a reminder, he's, 50, 60 days, 70 days into the job, and so great job answering all those questions. You can tell his passion. I'm just really, really excited about this work, and we have a long way to go. All right, to Nicole's point in regards to metrics, I think that we need to think about that. We need to think about, and when we talk about guaranteeing people jobs, right? That's why, it's hard to guarantee people jobs if the jobs aren't available, because we just have, one of the lowest turnover rates for teachers in the Denver metro. So, if not the lowest. And so there's an interesting dynamic that we have to work through, but we certainly can do that. I think that, to James's point, anytime that we're not doing better than the past year is we're not happy about that, but, he's digging in, figuring out how we can get better, and so really appreciate the work that Dr. Hill was able to do, and appreciate the presentation.
Next, we have the legislative update, but I don't think we have anything on the legislative update, not yet. The JBC will start meeting soon, and we'll start having things to talk about, but we have some other really good things on the agenda, so I think we'll just keep moving along. So next, we have action items consent grouping. Does anyone need a break? We took a break before, but my notes say I should ask if we need a break. We're good? Okay. 8.1 personnel items, 8.2 approval of minutes, September 27, 2022, 8.3 approval of minutes, September 27, 2022, 8.4 acceptance of donation, Foothill Elementary, 8.5 acceptance of donation, Lafayette Elementary, 8.6 acceptance of donation, Mesa Elementary, 8.7 acceptance of donation, Southern Hills Middle School, 8.8 approval of contract to Cybersoft Technologies Incorporated, Primero Edge, to purchase a software solution for food services. 8.9, Resolution 22-27, LGBTQ representation and standards in curriculum. 8.10, Resolution 22-28 in support of ballot measure Proposition FF. 8.11, Resolution 22-29, ratification of negotiated agreement between the Boulder Valley School District and the Boulder Valley Classified Association affiliated with the Colorado Education Association and the National Education Association. 8.12, supplemental material purchase, Playposit. And 8.13, grant College and Career Connections, Carl Perkins Career and Technical Education, Colorado Community Colleges. Are there any items board members would like to pull from the consent agenda?
I would like to pull 8.9.
Is that it, Richard?
Yeah, that's all.
Anybody else want to pull anything?
Can I make a correction? When you stated Resolution 22-29, the correct number should be 22-30. It was corrected by clerical error today.
So which one, Laura? 8 point which one?
It's the resolution number that says 22-29, the ratification of the BVCA agreement. It should be 22-30.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anybody want to pull anything now? Okay, so the only thing that's pulled is 8.9. So do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
And second, Nicole? So Laura, do you want to call the roll on this, and then we'll move to 8.9?
Garcia.
Yes.
Gebhardt.
Yes.
Niznik.
Yes.
Rajpal.
Yes.
Sargent.
Yes.
Sweeney Moran.
Yes.
Zis.
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right, Richard, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Kathy. The reason I wanted to pull 8.9 is because, as I mentioned earlier, it's such an important resolution that I believe that we need to have it read out loud and then vote on it so that our public hears it too from our voice here on the board.
Stacy?
Before we read it out loud, and I'm not opposed to it at all, but I noticed it's pretty different than the one we talked about 2 weeks ago. And I was wondering if we could have an explanation why it's quite different.
Kathleen, can you answer that? Or Rob?
Thank you for that question. Yes, after the board's last meeting, I received both community input and some individual board member input about the resolution. I found that that input was consistent with the board's discussion about the reason that the resolution would be considered by this board. It also seemed to me to strengthen the resolution in that it provided much deeper context and discussion of the legislative history that created the conversation. As a result, I enhanced that resolution by incorporating community input and board member feedback and tried to note that in the agenda item. I had a conversation with Board President Gephardt that despite the press of business, it's really important that I take the opportunity to really inform the board when there are changes to agenda items like this one, just so you can understand what's happened and the board can make sure that that's the direction that it would like to go. So duly noted, and I'll look to do that in greater detail in the future.
Any other questions, Stacy? So Kathleen, in the future, if there's a resolution, what is, or Rod, the best practice and policy for amending it so that it's not just amended by one person or one community member, that it's a collective amendment since we're voting on it as a board? Is there a process that we should be following going forward?
Certainly open to any process that the board would suggest or would want to do that. You certainly can always do that in public as we bring these resolutions forward to you. I think past practices, as folks had feedback and input, we would take that and make the adjustments and then bring it to the board for approval. I do think that we're going to have to work on this whole resolution piece as a whole in regards to process as a board, so we better understand what the expectations are. I think that we can always do that in public. I think that every board member has opportunities to weigh in on these issues, and we try to just integrate everybody's feedback and try to make it fit the collective needs of the board, especially on resolutions, but be open to any other process that you all might suggest.
So I welcome that conversation. It seems like we could think about something that we do like with policy where we get a red line version so we can see what it was that we'd approved the last time and what's changed, so we don't have to go back and forth, and maybe have a better understanding going forward of where those changes came from. I think that would be really helpful so that there's a more public process as far as amending this, and so we understand kind of where the changes came from and why. I get that they're consistent. I just think that going forward we might want to think about a better practice and policy for doing this. So Richard, I nominate you.
I'd be delighted.
Hold on, Kitty?
Well, I just had a thought, if it's okay with Richard. There are 7 whereas paragraphs. What if we each read one? And then Kathy could read the therefore because she's president. If that's okay with folks.
Sure, let's start. Okay, let's start with you, Richard.
I'd be delighted. Thank you very much, Kitty, for that suggestion. Boulder Valley School District RE2 Resolution Number 22-27. Support for inclusion of BIPOC and LGBTQ representation and curriculum and standards. Whereas the Boulder Valley School District Board of Education has become a national model for school districts seeking to create a safe schools for all students by adopting policies in support of LGBTQ people.
Whereas Colorado has been a leader in creating laws that protect the rights and equitable recognition of Indigenous, Latino, African, and Asian Americans, LGBTQ, and other historically marginalized peoples, passing HB 19-1192 to ensure the inclusion of the history, culture, and social contributions of racial and ethnic groups and LGBTQ individuals in public school curricula and academic standards.
Whereas recommendations for the social studies academic standards were proposed by a commission appointed by the governor that was intentionally representative of the above-mentioned groups, and these groups advanced the intent and spirit of HB 19-1192.
Whereas the establishment of social studies standards that are fully inclusive and accurate will allow all students to see themselves in the richness of history, improve awareness and cultural competence, and better equip them to succeed in our diverse and global society.
Whereas the BVSD board recognizes that including historically marginalized people in standards and curriculum does not make the instruction or content a controversial subject or part of a comprehensive human sexuality education under state law, subject to notice and waiver requirements.
Whereas the BVSD board believes that creating equitable working and learning conditions for staff and students includes providing curriculum and instruction for all levels that includes people and leaders who reflect diverse identities, and
Whereas the BVSD board expresses its deep concern over the Colorado State Board of Education's consideration of the almost complete removal of LGBTQ and BIPOC communities from lower grade social studies standards against the intent and spirit of HB 19-1192.
Now therefore be it resolved that the BVSD Board of Education reaffirms its commitment to policies that support and represent the diverse people and families in our communities and opposes any action by the Colorado State Board of Education to remove or limit the representation of LGBTQ and BIPOC people from the social studies curriculum and standards. So I think we need a motion to approve this.
So move.
second.
Second by Kitty. And I have a question. Are there any more comments on this one? So Rob or Kathleen, I have a question for you because we've received some emails asking about opting out of instruction around LGBTQ, and I don't know how that would even be possible. It's not like we have a separate curricular strand or topic like sexual education or those kinds of things that the state statutes require us to opt out of. I was wondering if you could just maybe allay some of the fears that this is just how things are going to be woven into a curriculum, and maybe it's possible, but I'm struggling with how we could provide notice every time an LGBTQ issue is going to be raised to allow parents to opt out. So could you address that just a little bit?
Again, we're happy to connect with all those parents individually. These are not things that you can opt out of in the curriculum. These are the standards of the curriculum. The only opt-outs that are allowed per Colorado law are around sex education. Do I have that correct, Kathleen?
Yes, that's correct, Dr. Anderson. And those definitions of what that education and instruction entails, the notice, and then the ability to waive the child from that instruction is addressed in BVSD Board Policy IGAE.
So we can refer parents to that and to the state statute. But am I correct in surmising that there aren't discrete pieces of curriculum that we would send notice home saying we're going to be talking about LGBTQ history tomorrow for 10 minutes so you can opt your kid out? I don't know that it's too interwoven, I think, because as you say it's standards, it's not curriculum. Okay. Any other questions? Laura, can you call the roll?
Garcia.
Yes.
Gebhardt.
Yes.
Niznik.
Yes.
Rajpal.
Yes.
Sargent.
Yes.
Sweeney Moran.
Yes.
Zis.
Yes.
Motion passes.
So the next action item is 9.2, board policy platform. I'll turn that over to you, Rob, or to Kathleen.
Yes, and I will turn that over to Kathleen, who's made some edits and adjustments. And happy to chime in, Kathleen, if there's anything I need to explain.
There we go. Okay. So this is the document formerly known as the BVSD Legislative Platform. Based on this board's discussions over several meetings, this has become a more comprehensive document that really incorporates the board's positions on policy items that arise both in the state legislature, in federal legislative bodies and agencies. So it has been retitled. The attachment is in redline form that includes all of the changes that have been made over the last several meetings, still as red lines. Since our last meeting, since the last time the board looked at this, in addition to changing the title of the document, the red lines reflect the board's discussion that ballot items would be considered twice a year during the board's prioritization sessions, and has some additional language about resolutions on those items. Also, consistent with the board's conversations, we updated the language around the adequacy study that's reflected on page 2.1. We also, based on the board's conversation, deleted the item on preschool, since that was accomplished in the last legislative session, as well as the item on the Public Employees Retirement Association, based on legislative actions last year. I believe that we updated item 3.1 to incorporate several thoughts around, several of the board's policy positions around a review of the state's accountability system, including the impact of assessment metrics on historically marginalized groups. And added, we made a complete sentence in new item 3.3. It was 3.4 last time, and board member Sargent and others pointed out that it didn't actually finish that sentence. So allowing, stating the position of this board, the importance of local boards' ability to consider all available data, including enrollment trends when looking at authorization of charter schools. And then aligned with the resolution that this board just adopted, on the last page, the final redlined item is 3.6, supporting the inclusion and representation of LGBTQ individuals and other historically marginalized groups in school curriculum and state standards. And that's a summary of the changes to this since the board acted on it last calendar year.
Thanks, Kathleen. Board members, any questions, comments? Nicole?
On page 2, item number 2.7, it says BVSD supports federal funding to continue providing healthy, nutritious meals. However, this evening, the board passed a resolution in support of Proposition FF to support state funding for that. And the language around continuing federal funding is no longer accurate since the federal government decided to not provide those services this year. So I would like those two orders of clarification on 2.7, please.
Can you say that one more time? You lost me, Nicole.
2.7 says BVSD supports federal funding to continue providing healthy, nutritious meals to students at no cost to reduce, et cetera. But the federal government no longer provides free meals. So continuing is not correct. And also, we just this evening passed a resolution in support of Proposition FF in support of state funding. So I'd like to add the state in addition, state and federal, to the first sentence. And remove the continuing. So support state and federal funding to provide healthy and nutritious meals, if that's the will of the board.
Any comments on that proposed change?
Makes sense.
I have a,
Kitty?
could we change continue to resume? or no?
But the state has never provided funding, so
Right.
resume wouldn't work for,
But it would for the feds.
But the feds already do, it's just not very much. So it wouldn't really be resumed because they're already doing it, it's just not the full funding.
Well, resume providing meals to all students at no cost.
Are you okay with leaving it the way Nicole proposed it? Okay. Any other proposed changes, board members, to our new policy, what are we calling it, platform?
Can I get some clarification on what you mean on,
I'm sorry, what, Richard?
just need clarification on 2.5, where it talks about opposing attempts to divert public dollars away from public schools in the form of vouchers, tax credits, coupons, or any other like initiatives, including preschool and childcare programs. And I'm not sure whether that would include the recently passed legislation as it relates to our universal pre-K that's currently in place.
But isn't it true that the preschool funding isn't for full-time preschool? So those things may still come into play, right?
Correct.
It's not for full-time preschool.
Right.
Yeah, so some of these things that are listed may still actually happen. Because preschool isn't paid for.
Correct, but I guess if the new department says that, yes, they're going to try and get funding for full-time preschool, then we would oppose it?
I think we'd have to see where the funding was coming from, what we were cutting. I couldn't answer that question in the abstract, Richard. I don't know how to answer that.
Right. But if that's what this means, then it would seem like we would oppose it, if it came to be.
I don't read it that way.
No? Okay. If I'm the only one reading it that way, that's fine. I'm just trying to be cautious here that we're not going to undercut any attempt by the new department as it relates to their preschool programming.
and because this is a living document, if something like that were proposed at the state legislature, we could have the opportunity to amend this current platform as well to accurately reflect the will of the board.
So then, don't worry, Richard.
Well, Richard, also the way, I mean, maybe it's not written as clearly as it could, but the way I read it is the preschool and childcare programs are subsets of vouchers, tax credit, coupons, and other initiatives, which we would oppose.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, any other questions about the policy platform? As Nicole just said, I'm sure we will be revisiting this frequently as the legislature resumes, and we may have some modifications or additions to it. So it's on for action. Are there any other, I probably should have had a motion before we had the discussion, sorry. Is there a motion to approve the 2022 BVSD policy platform? Moved by Stacy, seconded by Kitty or Beth. All right, Laura, any further discussion? All right, are we okay? As amended, I guess I should say.
Yes, I believe that's clear with that correction by Board Member Rajpal. So with that minor language change to that item would be the motion.
So the motion for 2022 BVSD policy platform as amended. Stacy, you're still okay? Kitty, you're still okay? Okay. Can you call the roll?
Garcia.
Yes.
Gebhardt.
Yes.
Niznik.
Yes.
Rajpal.
Yes.
Sargent.
Yes.
Sweeney Moran.
Yes.
Zis.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you, Kathleen, for all that hard work. Feels good to be moving forward on that. Thanks, Rob. The next is 9.3, final calendar years. Final calendars for 23, 24, 24, 25 school years. I've seen that Robin is moving in case we have questions. Do we have a motion to approve 9.3? So moved by Kitty, seconded by Stacy. Comments, questions? Okay, I think we're ready to call the roll.
Garcia.
Yes?
Gebhardt.
Yes?
Niznik.
Yes.
Rajpal.
Yes.
Sargent.
Yes.
Sweeney Moran.
Yes.
Zis.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Now we'll move on to 9.4, Board of Education's discussion on advocacy and consideration of resolution. And Rob, can you do the introduction for this, please?
Can I request a quick 3-minute break before we get into the subject?
Of course. I don't think this will be lengthy, but sure, we can have a break. We're back in session. We're now going to address 9.4, and I have a question that might help 9.4 go a little more smoothly. I'd like to break it into two pieces because there's two pieces to it. One is our discussion on advocacy, and the other is the consideration of the resolution. So I don't think, I mean, they're related, but not the same. So if it's all right, I would like to do the resolution and then move to discussion of advocacy. And
There's actually three. There's also that MOU. So
Kathleen will explain that because I had a
Okay.
question about that too.
Okay.
It's related to the resolution. So it's something that we can't really not pass. We're not going to take a vote on it. We're only going to vote on the resolution. Am I right, Kathleen?
Yes, that's correct. So the title of this item was the one that we amended from the time that it was 12.3 originally, which was really that broad language around advocacy. And then we updated it to reflect the resolution that the board wanted to consider. There are 3 attachments to this board item, but there is only one attachment that the board is considering. The MOU and the list of resolutions are provided as context for the board. So the MOU is an existing agreement that the school district has with the City of Boulder library system. We have these MOUs in place. We have one with the City of Boulder. We have one with the City of Broomfield. They both address the Student One initiative, which is a program that is longstanding in the school district, through which kids who are enrolled in our school district can get direct access to library materials without having to take a parent with them to the library in order to be able to check out items. So that MOU is only provided as context so that the board can understand the existing relationship that we have to libraries in the City of Boulder. That's it. It's already in effect. You're not voting on that particular MOU because it's in place. The other attachment is a list of resolutions that Board Secretary Laura Schaefer and I prepared just to give the board a historical look at the types of ballot measures that the board has taken positions on in the past. That's it. It also is not an item for the board to address tonight. The only item that the board would be considering as part of this is the resolution 22 dash, am I going to get it right? 22-29, which addresses support for the Boulder County ballot measure.
So with that clarification, is my proposal for how we go forward make sense? And the other thing I'd like to address is I have some concern that the discussion about advocacy is an in-depth discussion that we may need to have, and we have 2 very important, I think very important to our mission presentations still to go tonight. So if that conversation starts to go, I would reserve my right as board president to move that to a work session sometime in the winter of 2023, because it may need additional, it may not, we may get through it tonight, but if we don't, I'd really like to honor our 2 guests who are here to do presentations on Casey and on our UIP, because I think that's really important work. Are we okay with that too? Okay, so is there a motion on 2229?
I move to approve this resolution.
Is there a second?
I second.
All right. Board members, conversation. Lisa?
Yeah, I'd like to make a statement in support. So the first thing that occurs to me is that I hadn't really thought initially, but we're having this conversation on National Coming Out Day, and that's making me reflect back on how in the 90s the library is one of the few safe spaces in Boulder where kids could be queer. It was a common meeting space for high school and middle school kids to meet after school when we had no place else safe to go. I was looking the other day over a pamphlet in a news article from the Denver Post for the Don't Read This program I participated in as a teen in the 90s. The program promoted the value of banned books, and let me speak about a book called Annie on My Mind that was a love story between two teenage girls in New York City. Other kids chose banned books that mattered to them. And at that time, in the 90s, BVSD schools, which initially had invited us to perform, saw the content of the presentation and banned us from performing in BVSD schools. I say this to point out that the relationship between BVSD and Boulder Public Library has always been important for our students, and that the library has been there for our students and families at times and in ways that we have not. Moving from the personal to the general, okay, here's a list of things. Our students and families rely on the public library system for many, many things. For resources for papers, for new reading materials, for Boulder Public Library's Student One program that Kathleen mentioned, for Summer of Discovery reading program that provides reading support to the 700 BVSD students in summer school, for Book Rich Environments program, which provides free books for our free and reduced lunch and low-income students, for the Reading Buddies program at Uni Hill, which partners K-3 age children with college-age students and above to improve their reading scores, for the Boulder Reads program, which incidentally I was a volunteer for back in 2005, and it was actually the first step I took in the career into teaching. More than half of the students who participate in Boulder Reads are BVSD English language learners. And let's see, Building 61 apprenticeship program, which partners with I Have a Dream Foundation and BVSD students. Students receive both a budget for materials as well as a stipend to pursue their advanced technology ideas. I also know of at least one school, Horizons, that doesn't have a library and that relies on the Boulder Public Library for its books and DEI collection. The parents go and pick the books up there, and the school uses them to enhance their curriculum. These are just some of the things I know about. I'm sure that the library does even more. I heard something from another board member about how the library district only covers a portion of our district and how that means it's somehow outside the scope of our work. But we've been happy to celebrate the endorsements from our bond for folks like Boulder City Council and the Daily Camera, even though they only represent a portion of our district. We also celebrated the endorsement from Boulder County Dems, even though they also represent Longmont and they do not cover Broomfield. We are happy to take endorsements of things that directly affect us, and we should be equally willing to help support folks whose services directly intersect with our own. Whether that initiative in question covers all of Colorado, an area that only affects a single one of our mountain schools, or a district spanning the city of Boulder and areas beyond. It's undeniable that the relationship between the school district and the library district is deeply layered, connected across schools and age groups, and embedded in the very core of the work we do here. I am strongly in favor of ensuring that our libraries will be funded into the future, and I strongly support this resolution supporting the creation of a library district.
Any other board members? Kitty and then Nicole.
Okay, my comments have nothing to do with the value of libraries or the value of funding libraries or the formation of a district. We have each individually endorsed this ballot measure. However, some of the language in this resolution is not accurate because it says the proposed district would cover the city of Boulder and portions of unincorporated Boulder County, true, and is placed on the ballot for the residents and voters of Boulder County, but not all of them, just the ones who live in the district. So that's inaccurate, and I don't like that. And paragraph 6 implies that the new library district will be for all residents of Boulder County, which is true, but it is no more true than the current system. Anybody can go to any of the libraries. So, you know, for that reason, I don't want to support this specific resolution. And also the noticing issue. But.
Nicole?
So as Kitty said, we all personally supported this initiative. My concerns with this, as supporting it from a board perspective, in addition to not providing ample public notice for people to provide input in potential opposition. I am really concerned about us asking our taxpayers for another tax increase at a time of economic uncertainty and hardship when we are going for our own bond. In fact, this library district measure would be more expensive than our own bond, with average house prices in the city of Boulder 1.2 to 1.6 million. The families are looking at somewhere in the ballpark of almost $300 per year in perpetuity. I'm concerned about our ability to pass a future bond if tax rates get significant, that folks start across the board denying tax increases in ballot measures. And this is something I've been hearing from our public since our last meeting to this one, asking us not to take up this resolution because the tax burden is significant between these two measures. And they might have to choose. It's not a position I want our board to be in if we have already publicly endorsed our school bond ballot initiative. So that is sort of my big worry for us as a board. I also wonder, in measures that are divisive in our communities, if that is a space for us to wade into, and I will reserve that for the other portion of our comments, but something I am holding space for, in addition to Kitty's comments about when we're using language about Boulder County, who is being served, who is being impacted, what exactly is that in this resolution?
Stacy?
My concern with this is about process, that, and it feeds into our other conversation, but I'd like to know how this even came to be. Can anyone just in passing say, hey, will you take this to the board and support our measure? We have so many municipalities that we represent. This could open a huge can of worms. And personally, I would like to get back to the work of the district, not spend all of our time on ballot measures and things like this that are not the three things that we were elected to do, which is budget policy and to supervise the superintendent. So yes, I live in Boulder and I personally supported this, but as a board, I worry about the process by which this came to us.
Anyone else? Beth?
I feel like I could almost say ditto to exactly what Stacy said. I appreciate, Kathy, that you started off by discussing how we need to really disentangle this particular resolution from the need for a process by which we as a board support a resolution. Our conversation's gotten kind of overlapped, and I think we all want to split it up so we can have a more productive path moving forward. I am sensitive to the timing of this particular resolution. I think we're now forced to have this conversation in the public. It's my hope that this isn't setting a precedent. I agree with Stacy. What's our process? How do we make sure that we're equitable and making sure everything can come through the board kind of appropriately? So, and exactly what you said, Stacy. For me, this is about keeping students at the core of our work and what we're doing here and the things we were elected to do. And so I do feel that the library district draws a fairly clear line to supporting our students in our district.
Richard?
Well, I'm going to support the resolution with my yes vote on it for all the reasons that Lisa just mentioned and the reasons that are on the whereases here too. And I am going to, hopefully when we get to the advocacy discussion, a lot of the things that we're talking about now, we'll be talking about later so that we can put some safeguards in whatever resolutions we're going to be looking at in the future. And I'm looking forward to that particular discussion, and I'm thinking that it might be able to be a work session because it's a lengthy discussion, and there's 7 different opinions here, so I think we need to be respectful of the 7 opinions, and I think a work session would probably be the best way to do it. But I will support the resolution with my yes vote.
Anyone else? Lisa, and then I'm going to go.
Yeah, I just have a question. I'm trying to understand whether Kitty would support this resolution if we change the Boulder County language, and if Kathleen makes that resolution and we bring it back next time, whether that's something she's looking for. I just wasn't really clear how that, whether you were asking for a change or whether you were just suggesting you weren't in support.
That's a good question because I have had conflicting thoughts on this in terms of us as a board acting. You know, I personally supported it, you know, as I mentioned before, so did we all. It's possible I would support it if it were changed, but I can't tell you for sure that I would, because like I said, I've been hearing from different people, but I've also been thinking more about it in terms of us, you know, us as a board. And I had been thinking about what Nicole said about asking for tax dollars, and I would like to ask for tax dollars for our schools. And if it makes that harder with other tax issues being passed too, then we're saying, pay this tax and then pay that tax, and we're in favor of it all. And so I guess the answer, the short answer to the long one I'm giving you is, I don't know, Lisa.
And it's up for vote right now, so we have a motion and a second, so.
Well, I understand that, but obviously we've modified things in the past for small language changes prior to making, so I think it was an important clarification.
Anyone else? So I am going to be a no. I appreciate, Lisa, your eloquent description of how important libraries are. I don't disagree. That's why I personally supported this. Libraries are an essential part of our community, but I see a big difference between how the library works and the votes of support that we're getting from our communities. If you live in Broomfield, you don't have full access to the library, but the people who are voting to support our bond will all be directly benefited by the bond. So I just think there's a big difference between seeking support of our constituents who will also need to be voting on it and who will be receiving support from it and who will benefit from it, as opposed to something like this. And so I feel like this takes us away from our mission. In wearing my school board hat, I need to look at the whole district, not just BVS, not just the county. And so for those reasons, I will not be supporting this resolution. So can we call the vote, Laura, unless there's any other conversation?
Garcia.
Yes.
Gephardt.
No.
Niznik.
Yes.
Rajpal.
No.
Sargent.
No.
Sweeney Moran.
Yes.
Zis.
No.
Motion fails.
So now, Rob, can you help us set the table for the conversation on advocacy? I think this has been something we've been bringing up kind of over the past few weeks, sparked in part because of the conversation around the library district, and now we've put that behind us. But I think it raised some important questions around policy and practice. And so, Stacy, you want to go, and then we can let Rob chime in if.
Yeah, just before Dr. Anderson speaks, Richard just suggested that we move it to a work session, and I second that. I think this is going to be a much more lengthy conversation. I want to respect our presenters, and I think it will be a really great, enriching conversation when we have time to really concentrate on it. So I look forward to hearing what Dr. Anderson has to say, but I would propose to not even discuss it at all and move it to a work session.
And I also think we just passed a policy platform that has what we're supposed to be doing going forward. Although we didn't do it with this, we kind of knew we weren't going to do it with this, but we now have a policy platform for that we've all voted on. So it might make sense to bump it. Rob, turn it over to you.
This agenda item is in direct response to the board's request at the end of last meeting, where I was trying to get clarity and space for the board to have the conversation that you need to have around when do you weigh in, when do you not weigh in, to give you some rules of the road in fairness to other organizations and to this board. And so we created the space as we developed the agenda. You know, we had asked staff to give you resources and materials related to the resolution that you just acted upon, as just a way for the board to have this space. Because when these issues come up and they're timely, our board prioritization process doesn't work because we're only acting on things every 6 months, right? But if there are items that come up, and there have been other resolutions that this board has passed, right, that have come up similarly and in time, and it's just kind of worked out. There was just more unified support. But now we have a situation that I just think that the board needs some process and structure and policy around, and we are happy to support you in having that discussion. I'll just need clear direction on what you need from us and what you'd like for us to do. We can look at what other school districts do in this regard or don't do, if that would be helpful. We can do a little bit of research. We could get you a facilitator for the conversation if you'd like. But I feel like that by having this conversation, setting a process, then we'll avoid some of the clunkiness of this agenda item, which I know had mixed opinions on how we did that. I apologize. I take full responsibility. Just trying to give you all the space so you can do the work of the board in your role as elected officials.
So Rob, how about this, and board, how about this? We will have a prioritization meeting in January. We can see if we can find a time when Heather Berg could help facilitate this. And we could talk about when we add that as a work session with Heather Berg helping facilitate what that would look like. I'm just throwing that out as an idea. We don't have anything set yet, but it seems like it's consistent with our work plan, and I don't know. What do people think? Does that make sense? Yep. I'm getting nods. Rob, is that okay?
Whatever I support whatever you all decide.
I know, but
again, we just want to be helpful in support. We don't want to make things more complicated. We just want to provide you the tools and resources that you need to have. And so if the will of the board is to have this conversation tacked on to our board prioritization, we can have Laura find a time. We can talk to Heather about the process. I would ask that, Kathy, as president, you and Heather and I could meet to discuss what this might look like, to give her some ideas around what the facilitation of that would look like, and I think we'd be good.
So Kathleen, do we have to do something formal to move this from action to a work session? Because it is showing up as an action item, but it was kind of conflated with the resolution.
Yeah, no, there's no action required by the board. This just gives you the ability to take action if you choose to do so, and the board can also choose not to take action.
Or postpone action.
Yes. I don't think there's anything further required.
So I don't know that we need to take we don't need to take a vote to move it to work session. Is anybody opposed to moving it to a work session at the beginning of the year? I'm not seeing anybody saying no. So, all right, I think, I'm sorry? Yes.
Are there things we might do to make this this conversation more productive and expedient at the work session with Heather? I think, like, for me, there's a lot of questions around what impact looks like, and whole districts, localities. There's lots of questions I have about potential guiding principles. Is there something we can do ahead of time in advance to make that the conversation that we're going to have in the future more productive? Is where I'm getting at.
So I was thinking, Nicole, that we would have Heather help us map out what the conversation would look like during prioritization. So that then when we have it, obviously we can change it, but I thought that preliminary conversation, like you're saying, would be really helpful to have facilitated like we do when we have conversations about what we're going to add to the agenda. It's a little different, but I think it'll help us guide our conversation when we get it scheduled. Does that answer that? Okay. Anybody else? Okay, we are on to study. So Rob, do you want to introduce our first study item?
It would be my pleasure to introduce our first study item. Board members, we are proud to have our Assistant Superintendent of Schools, Robin Fernandez, and our new principal at Casey Middle School, Brian Shaw, to come and present the Casey Middle School Priority Improvement Plan. This is part of the state's process that when schools fall into priority improvement, that there's a public hearing and a board presentation. I will say that before they speak, I've spent time at Casey Middle School. I know that our leadership at BVA has spent time at Casey Middle School. We're already seeing marked improvements in culture, climate, belief, and we have all the confidence in the world in Mr. Shaw and his ability to to bring Casey to the academic levels of growth and achievement that we know that is possible. And so with that, I will turn the presentation over to Robin Fernandez.
Good evening, President Gebhardt, members of the board, and Dr. Anderson. As Dr. Anderson said, we are here to share information with you about Casey Middle School's Unified Improvement Plan, or UIP. The reason we are presenting this information to you this evening is based on state test achievement and growth scores. Casey Middle School was assigned a priority improvement plan at the beginning of this school year by the Colorado Department of Education. So in the 2 prior SPF cycles, school performance framework cycles, Casey had been in the improvement category. So as a result of the current rating, the school's Unified Improvement Plan needs to be submitted to the Colorado Department of Education for review after adoption by this board. So the board is asked to study the attached plan. So on this slide, you see a timeline that depicts the actions required by the Priority Improvement Plan. It began in August with analysis led by Principal Shaw. It continued in September with notification to families and the school's accountability committee. The purpose being to get authentic engagement with families and community in the school improvement process. And as we have learned earlier this evening, the public comment section of this board meeting serves as a required public hearing on the school Unified Improvement Plan. The plan will be placed back before this board for approval on October 25th. Finally, through a thorough process involving the Casey Middle School staff, school accountability committee, and district leaders, Principal Shaw led the development of the draft Unified Improvement Plan and the subset of that plan, the 90-day plan that he will describe here in a moment. The last step of the process will be to submit the approved Unified Improvement Plan to the Colorado Department of Education. And as Dr. Anderson said, we would like to officially introduce or reintroduce you to Principal Bryant Shaw and to welcome him back home to BVSD. He was last in BVSD as an assistant principal at Aspen Creek Pre-K-8 before he left to join Aurora Public Schools as a middle school principal. And while he was in Aurora Public Schools, he was trained as a leader in the University of Virginia Partnership for Leaders in Education and implemented those tenets at his school. So therefore, he returns to us, and we are thrilled this year in BVSD that he has both the leadership experience and the toolbox that he needs to successfully lead this work at Casey. We are already, as Dr. Anderson stated, seeing many positive changes in both culture and climate and the systems and structures at Casey Middle School, and we are very excited to follow this school improvement journey with the Casey Middle School community. And with that, I will turn it over to Principal Shaw, who will describe the 90-day plan.
Good evening again, President Gebhardt, board members, Dr. Anderson. I'm excited to be home. I can go back to a time when Dr. Anderson told me, I'm going to come back and get you. You just hold tight wherever you're at. I'm going to come get you. He held true to his promise, and I'm going to hold true to my promise when I came in to become the principal at Casey Middle School to ensure that we can return our school back to excellence and establish a brand that our community can be proud of. And so when I think about culture and climate, culture is the thing that you do. Climate is how you feel about it. And as Dr. Anderson spoke, and as people that have come into our building, I ask people often, what does it sound like? What does it look like? What does it feel like? Because those are things that I pay attention to. If you're a person who comes to 1301 High Street, I want to make sure that you feel like you're a person that belongs regardless of where you're coming from. That's students, that's parents, that's any person that's in our community. That's a priority for me. And so when I think about how we were able to build these systems, because this was a collaborative process that was with our leadership team and it was with our stakeholders. We talked with parents, we talked with students around what do you want this school to look like? And so as we were able to get that information, we were able to build this 90-day plan, and knowing that this is a living document, this is fluid. It's going to be a thing sometimes that may change and it'll alter as we're hitting benchmarks. And so when we talk about creating school conditions that foster an environment that are conducive for learning and inclusive and welcoming for all,
That comes when you think about middle school kids, sometimes repetition. There's also clarity around expectations and structures, and you can see that inside of our building as you talk about how do kids do school. That's a priority for us. And so as we continue to work through that and teach students how to be their best self, that culture and climate piece is a partnership that's also with parents and guardians. When we look at our second rock, when you look at the collaborative structures, implementing data with informed collaboration. So what the thing about is we wanted to build relational trust inside of our building with our staff. And when you're able to collaborate, you're able to synergize the learning and the expertise that we already have inside of that building. And when we use data, like the intention is to help us understand exactly what our students need for us to support them and what to focus on. This includes, obviously, the CMAS data that put us inside of this world of priority improvement, but we're also leveraging resources like IXL for math. We're looking at Common Lit, and we refer to those during the school year's measures to figure out where our students are and as the year goes on and see where they're progressing. Finally, we're using the student work when we have conversations as educators to determine in real time, what do our students need? And the only way you can do that is A, having people have the ability to trust each other and put the student data on the table. We call it blameless reporting in our building when we look at data. We don't want to find fault, we want to find resolution because it's all about student learning in our building. And so when you look at our third priority, the assessment strategies, being able to utilize lesson design and delivery informed by data conversations, that has to be aligned to grade level standards and access. Regardless of where a student comes from, being able to provide grade level content is going to be one of the keys to moving students academically from growth to proficiency. And so as we look at progressive measures, we have to make sure that students are all instructed at grade level standard. So as a staff, we're working on universal instruction that's rooted in lesson delivery, and it's based on the standards that are talking about how all students are supported in either exceeding or reaching proficiency. Notice I said all students. I don't talk about the students that make it convenient. It's all students. When we say all, we really mean all. And the only way that we can know that is making sure that we're using the data intentionally to have a plan for our instruction. And so as we move forward, this, like I said, the 90-day plan is going to be a thing that we'll be constantly revising and checking for measures of success. And it's also going to help us be intentional. It's the thing that keeps our focus narrowed on the thing that's important, and that's student learning. At this point, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Richard?
Thanks for the presentation, Principal Shaw.
Yes.
Just a quick question that I have in terms of priority 1, priority 2, and priority 3. On collaborative structures, are you giving any thought to working with the community, family engagement, those kinds of things, so that they can be more supportive to the mission of KC?
Well, thank you, Mr. Garcia, for pointing that out. You know, it's something that we can look at as far as putting it inside of the documentation, but community engagement is woven into all aspects of what we do in our building. But having it inside of the document, that's definitely something that we can look into weaving in.
Is that it, Richard?
Thank you.
Any other questions, Nicole?
I appreciate all that you share because a lot of the questions I had that I didn't see directly referred to in the written document, you were able to answer orally. And so I'm going to take you on your word for that since I don't know you very well. Question, where schools that are in turnaround or priority improvement, state law explicitly asks for them to have community input. And you talked to that a little bit. I know your SAC is rather fledgling, and building that community is an important first step. I was wondering if you could walk us through what that community engagement looked like around this UIP and what kind of feedback you incorporated, maybe as a result of that community feedback.
Absolutely. I think the most exciting part of that SAC meeting, we had about 11 parents show up for it, and they were able to look at the 90-day plan and wrestle with that a little bit. I think the one thing that got me excited was when the parents said, Mr. Shaw, what can we do to help you get this school where you want it to go? And so the back and forth, I mean, our DAC and SAC rep, I've been working with her for the last month and a half and sharing just the process of how did we actually build this 90-day plan. When we look at root cause analysis, what does that look like amongst with our staff? But having them always know and having an understanding on what it's like to be a parent or a guardian at Casey Middle School from an educational perspective. Having those conversations with parents, whether it's at a PTA meeting or at a SAC or DAC, has been a big part of how we're driving the needs for our students.
Thank you for that. Another question I had was around the improving school culture and climate. How are you measuring that outside? A lot of the measurements and the metrics related directly to improved math scores.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, I get the throughput, but are you using alternative measures to show improvement in culture and climate aside from growth in achievement or academic growth and achievement through CMAS?
Yes, ma'am. We actually look at attendance data. Happy students are students that have well attendance. And if you look at some of the data from the past, I think last year at this time, there were 31 students that had 80% or less attendance at this time in the school year. At this point right now, we're at 20. So students are showing up. And not only are they showing up, but they're in class. They're not in hallways. Our counselors are using one of the measures of student learning inside of their evaluation around some of the culture and climate and how students feel. And one of our teachers, their MSL is rooted inside of the TLCC survey and how things are improving from a perspective of teachers.
One last question, and then I'll hold for there. See, now I lost it. Oh, in the first couple pages of your UIP, I noticed that implementation benchmarks and action steps were missing. Some of those were addressed in the 90-day plan. I was just wondering, given you are working through both a 90-day plan and a 2-year plan, and this might be a question for you or the district, how are those working in tangent? Or those explicitly missing in the first couple pages of the UIP document, implementation benchmarks and action steps.
So that's a thing that I can get. I mean, I can get clarity on that as far as working with Mr. Dings and Claire. I can get back to you on that process.
Board members, any questions? I'm going to steal Lisa's question from the last presenter, which is, what can we do to be supportive? Because this is exciting, and welcome back.
Come see us. And not only when you come see us, give me open and feedback. Like I'm a front-facing organization, and in the customer service business, the community is our client. And a wise man once told me, great schools make great communities, and great communities make great schools. And I want to make sure that people in our community can come to us and give us feedback. We had the opportunity after our PTA meeting to have parents actually take a tour of the school, and some of the feedback that they gave us was there was structure, there was good energy, there was order, building was clean. Like, for people to be able to give us that feedback, that's something that I can bring back to the staff to let them know, stay on course. What we're doing is working, but we have a ways to go. But yeah, come see us.
All right, we may take you up on that offer.
Yeah.
All right, any other questions? Thank you so much. We look forward to our partnership and the great work. Thanks very much.
Yes, ma'am. Looking forward to it.
All right, Rob, I think we're up for our last study item, if you can do the introduction.
We are up for our last study item, our District Unified Improvement Plan. Board members, staff has been working on this for the past several months. We've been engaging with DAC leadership. We presented to DAC last two meetings ago on the content. Got some really good feedback. Really some things I think that we're working to consider as we bring you the edited Unified Improvement Plan. So I'm going to ask Jorge to come on up. Jorge Chavez, who's our DAC, who's our DAC lead on this, and to talk to you about the feedback that he has provided to us in regards to consider. The draft that you see here does not have that feedback yet included. We're on a different window this year, a shorter timeline. It has to be done by October. It used to have to be done in the spring. And so we're working through that. But I'd turn the presentation over to you, Jorge. And then once Jorge speaks, I'll have Jonathan come up and present the draft UIP and where we are.
Thank you, Superintendent Anderson and board members. Good evening. I appreciate the chance to kind of present an overview of the recommendations from the review of the UIP by the DAC membership. I'd like to start by saying that the DAC commends the district for clearly aligning the 2022-2024 BVSD UIP to the strategic plan and for including clear implementation benchmarks and action steps for each of the priority performance challenges that were identified. Similarly, it's clear that the UIP is designed to develop clear, concise, and quantifiable progress monitoring measures. And we want to acknowledge the valuable work that's been done by the district in making progress in these last couple of UIPs and this current UIP, and in particular, the progress towards making data available regarding these indicators that are being tracked now for the public in the form of the current dashboards. Similarly, we want to commend the district for the focus on inequities. It's clear that these are needed and important for us to address given longstanding disparities that are present across the district. As a starting point for our recommendations, in order for the DAC to meet its statutory requirements to review and provide feedback to the district, we recognize that the timeline this year in particular was extremely tight given the change to the new calendar. But I know we've made this recommendation in the past, but we'll continue to do so again, that it be optimal for us to have more time to review the UIP. At this point, we know it's due in October. The DAC doesn't start meeting until September. At any point earlier we can get that, I think that would make our job easier in terms of reviewing and giving a considerate feedback that kind of is deserved for this sort of process. We had members last spring talking about even being willing to meet in the summer if that was necessary. So any steps in that direction would be very useful. While we commend the focus on inequities in the current UIP, we would like to note that the root causes identified in the UIP do not acknowledge the role of institutional racism and structural bias as drivers of these inequities. And without identifying, recognizing, and naming this, then we cannot make progress towards addressing these issues that are clearly part of the root causes that underlie the whole system. We believe that the implementations designed in the current UIP, while making considerable progress toward addressing inequities, cannot do so without recognizing these as a starting point. To address this issue, the leadership of the DAC reached out to the leadership of the Latino Parent Advisory Council and the Parents of Color Council to review the UIP and provide explicit and substantive feedback and changes to the UIP, which we shared earlier with the district. So I would like to first acknowledge their work and their thoughtful consideration of the UIP in a very short timeline to review and provide that feedback. And that draft of the UIP with that feedback focused on addressing structural racism and institutional bias is linked inside the recommendations that we have currently. As a secondary point, while the PPCs, the priority performance challenges, and the major improvement strategies are well defined, the action steps and implementation benchmarks are at times not as well designed and do not always provide clear connections to the targets. There are many input indicators and some impact and outcome indicators. However, there are almost no output indicators. Without anchoring metrics, it is unclear how schools, the district, and the DAC can monitor the plan's implementation. And so we encourage the district to focus on making more explicit output indicators. And this kind of has to do with fidelity to what's being done. At times there are things like markers like 90% participation in a training program without any kind of follow-up to see, well, beyond the participation, does this translate into behavioral change or attitudinal change in the classroom? So a way to kind of look at the fidelity of what is being done. The current UIP has at several points specific focus on school staff, and particularly teachers, concerning training, support, structures at play. However, there's a considerable number of additional ministerial support staff, paraeducators who are also having considerable contact with students and have extraordinary decision-making power that would also benefit from these programs. And we encourage the district to focus on expanding some of these training, supports, and structures for them as well. And finally, we call for the UIP to include directly and in the process to address the role of the DAC, the SACs, and other parent engagement groups more explicitly. We recognize that the district is taking these steps in practice, but to explicitly state in the UIP the way in which they will be involved in progress monitoring, data review cycles, oversight, and feedback on this improvement plan. And I will stop there. Thank you.
Do we want to ask questions now or move to Jonathan? Do board members have any questions for Jorge? Lisa.
I didn't have a question for Jorge. Thank you, Jorge. But I have a question for Rob. I appreciate everything that Jorge shared here, and these specific recommendations seem fantastic. What do we do with this? I'm not very clear on what the next steps are with these recommendations.
We integrate them into our into the UIP. We wanted to make sure that the draft UIP that we've posted is what DAC gave their feedback to. So we've been talking about the feedback. We've been thinking about some of these deep issues that DAC engaged with our community on, brought to us how we can integrate these. And so we're going to be working hard this week, right, Jonathan, to get the board a new draft UIP integrating this feedback for you all to see.
And that's integrated as is or in part, or what would we anticipate seeing?
I'm not sure it's going to be all as is. We need to kind of review and take a look, but certainly integrated. But on Friday we'll share with you the draft. And I'll be talking to Jorge. We've already talked. I've got a few ideas. So.
Any other questions, Nicole?
These documents are long, so a red line would be much appreciated, or a highlighting of changes made, if I could suggest that. And I did have a question for Jorge. When you talk about the inclusion of institutional racism, implicit bias within the UIP's root cause, I was wondering if the DAC had a conversation about how that is directly and completely under the control of the district, because to be a root cause, the identified root cause must be clear on how it is completely under control of the district. I was wondering if you guys talked about how that would work.
Yeah, thank you for that question. I think that's an important point to make. I think part of it is recognizing that the underlying conditions that come into the school, right, is the presence of institutional racism and structural bias that's present throughout the community, and recognizing that, but that it's also present within our schools. It's present in the ways in which people have access to resources at the schools, the ways in which administrators or staff respond to parents who have language difficulties, the ways in which kids are selected for special education programs or have access to advanced gifted and talented programs. It's the ways in which kids are able to access free and reduced lunch programs. It's attitudinal differences, whether explicit or explicit forms of bias, or bias that's not recognized. And I think it's important for us to recognize as a district that we are not immune to the biases that are present outside of the school, and that unless we are going to explicitly address it and focus on it, then we can't solve the problem.
Richard?
Thank you, Jorge, for the memo and for some of those recommendations. I agree with you, and I'm just wondering, on the root causes identified in UIP do not acknowledge the role of institutional racism and structural bias as drivers. And looking at the UIP, the current one that I've read already, it does not recognize it. It does not recognize institutional racism or any of that. So I'm just wondering where in the UIP that would be included, whether it would be like a preamble to the document, or how would we address that?
Thank you for that question. We grapple with that as well, right, in terms of where it would fit. And I have to be honest, this structure is quite cumbersome of this document. And so we grapple with that, and we think it needs to be at the forefront. And so we inserted language at the forefront, recognizing that this is a major barrier that needs to be addressed. And then explicitly within the root causes as well, at different points in the document where it seemed that it would be able to fit. In parsing out some of the things that's already there to address inequities, but explicitly stating the role of root cause of institutional racism and structural bias in addition to other factors and other barriers. And so there's a link on the memo to a draft which has language that we've inserted at different points about where there's potential for inclusion. And I know the district has been receptive to reviewing that and our recommendations.
Thank you. I read that too. And I'm just wondering, and I agree with you that if you don't call it like it is, it's going to be difficult to implement any kind of strategies if we don't really identify the fact that, yes, we are currently looking at some of the inequities that the outcomes are based on institutional racism, et cetera. And now that we're going through a bunch of policy changes, and I'm thinking that maybe if the North Star for policy changes would be to start looking at policies regarding any language that lead to any kind of institutional racism or structural barriers.
I just wanted to second that. I'd advocated for that point as well already with you, Rob. And yes, just lend my voice to the belief that if we can't name it, we can't fix it. And I appreciate you bringing that forward.
Anyone else? Thank you, Jorge. This has been a lot of work, and as you say, it's a cumbersome document to work through, and we really appreciate all the hard work and input because it's such an important role for DAC to help us understand where you're coming from and get us the input, so really appreciate that.
Thank you.
You want to introduce Jonathan, Rob?
Board members, Jonathan Dings, our Director of Assessment and Accountability, is here to walk you through the current version without the edits that will be coming forward, but give you some of the general thoughts and ideas that are going to be within the district UIP. So, Jonathan, take it away.
President Gebhardt, members of the board, Dr. Anderson, you've already heard a lot about this plan, but allow me to provide the context in terms of how this improvement plan that you have a previous draft of relates to our strategic plan, what timeline it operates on, considering the district performances context, and then how it works in terms of connecting patterns and data with root causes and strategies, with time for your questions at the end. So the improvement plan that you're looking at now really should be thought of as opposed to a long-term 5 to 7 year or even longer strategic plan time frame. This is our statement of work we're doing in the next 2 years. And so in many ways, it is a targeted subset of all the things going on, right, in the strategic plan, and it will necessarily then in places be somewhat more detailed. But it'll also have some places where it's meeting state requirements so that we can say on the one hand we want to look at big overarching patterns and work on those. On the other hand, there's some other requirements that the document fulfills, such as a gifted and talented plan. So we have multiple purposes being served, hence the name. The Unified Improvement Plan, it serves multiple purposes, one plan that way. The planning process that we have really involves many of the same things as you've seen in past plans, beginning from data, looking at root causes, developing strategies, many of which, along with root causes proposed in this plan and patterns in the data, are continued from past work that you've seen. We provided DAC with a presentation on September 6th, and then with a written plan the week after, and we view that feedback as an important part of the planning process that we have. We'll be submitting this document to CDE at the very last day that's available to us to do that. So if we thought that this year's timeline was compressed, next cycle will be even slightly more so. In thinking about this plan, I think it's useful to remind ourselves that we began really with past year planning, doing much more purposeful reporting to DAC about what implementation of the plan looked like. In March, presented a timeline, and then got feedback from principals about how the plan worked and how it would support the work that they would see to doing in their buildings, and if there were steps that we were missing in the plan that they saw as obviously related to strategies. We talked about them as being important. We had a workshop with principals in June. We spent some time over summer writing out detailed actions and also checking patterns in the data to make sure that things we were concerned about didn't go away. Shortcut to the next slide, right? The patterns didn't go away. We had a plan. We had a meeting at the end of August with DAC reps from schools, SAC chairs, and principals to talk about data and to help them get kicked off on work they were doing over the course of the year with their SACs. And then, as we said previously, presentation of the UIP to DAC, and now board presentations. And then the cycle will go on in terms of reporting on how we're doing implementation in the coming months. As you remember from past slides, in the accreditation system that's used statewide, BVSD is accredited, missing by 2 percentage points, the highest rating. And that the patterns, though, that got us there, right, are ones that we've seen over time. We've seen high achievement over time. We've seen strong growth in Boulder Valley, yet we see differences in opportunity, and we see significant gaps for groups across the board in growth, achievement, and opportunity. So as we focus on this, right, and we really remember that this significant disparity is a persistent, problematic pattern in our data. We did talk a little bit about last month about some sort of nuanced patterns in the data, right? About how at the elementary level achievement looked mostly like it did pre-pandemic, as it did in high school and middle school and language arts, but that secondary math had fallen off. So there are some other nuances that they think about, and when we're doing the gifted and talented portion of the plan, one of the nuances would be to say achievement for gifted and talented students at middle and high school also fell off in math. So that the focus we have on math now really does answer some of the planning questions that we have in that way. But thinking that way aside, the main patterns really are the ones that we talk about here and that we've spoken about really at every meeting. This is a focus of our work. The UIP idea, basically, right, is going from pattern in the data, which in the lingo of the UIP is a priority performance challenge, to a root cause, that is what we believe adults could be doing differently that would help the pattern alleviate that we find so problematic. From there we go to major improvement strategies tailored to address the root cause or root causes, and then action steps that are much more specific versions of what's in the major improvement strategy. We then get to an idea of how we know that we've done what we actually planned. Implementation benchmarks there. So 4 more slides only, and the first one, right, talks about discipline. We have a clear pattern of discipline being inequitable. Now, what we've identified in this draft of the work that we're working on focuses on some ideas about unconscious bias, which is the notion, right, the people trying their best and hardest simply may not be aware that they have biases in the way they see a circumstance because of the particular student that they're working with, whether it's that student's language, whether it's that school's racial, whether it's that student's language, racial, ethnic background, gender. There are many things that can be, but our focus in this plan is on race, ethnicity, and poverty. When we talk about the root causes, though, that we can work on as adults in the endeavor trying to battle unconscious bias, it is inconsistencies in how we use data and gather it. It is inconsistencies in how we apply strategies. And it is inconsistencies in how we apply discipline. So the focus here is to use consistency as a strategy to get at unconscious bias. The idea of equitable discipline practices then means we keep working on the focus we've had in the past of working with principals and others in the building on data, and how do we gather that in a very even way, and how do we use the data effectively to reflect on the practices that we have and uncover instances where our unconscious bias got the better of our best efforts. There's work this year to improve systems to prevent and respond to bullying, and enhance systems that we made great progress with last year around restorative practices. And there's training around equity. I've read you the action steps. There are some benchmarks here noted about the particular things that we'll see, which in some cases are in even slightly more detail in the written version of the draft Unified Improvement Plan. In the interest of brevity and knowing we can come back to this if you wish to ask questions, the third from last slide tries to address the pattern in the data we find problematic around large disparities in academic acceleration. We find root causes here around lack of clear paths, and that there are systemic barriers to enrollment in accelerated coursework, which are laid out in the plan in more detail. In order to make accelerated coursework more available, we have a focus on student outreach, identifying particular students who express an interest, and using our knowledge of their interests and their sense of who a trusted adult is, who could talk to them about their interests, using that kind of outreach to help enroll students in advanced course opportunities of all kinds that are addressed in the Grad Plus initiative, right? Not just advanced coursework, right, but work-based learning experiences also. And in terms of efforts to make sure that students are encouraged to document the second language that they speak well, which we have a way to document on their transcript with a seal of literacy. In order to make this work well, we need clearer pathways for mathematics work where sequence really matters, and you need to get kids in the pipeline to make their taking of advanced coursework at the end more easily accomplished. As was mentioned in some in the past conversation that we've had about this year we are very clear in our public accountability for this work. These data are published on our website in a way that emphasizes the gaps that we are so focused on. There's more detail there in action steps, but in implementation benchmarks. We can talk more about that. But our second to last slide would focus on the meat of a lot of work here around multi-tiered system of supports and data-driven instruction. These address many things, but one that they address is disproportionate identification for special ed. and that we see root causes here around inconsistent use of data at the individual student level to inform planning, and an inadequate variety of interventions to address needs before a student is referred for special ed. The work that's being done, the action steps that are being proposed here have to do with coaching of folks in schools on how to do data-driven instruction really effectively at high-needs schools. And the insistence that others will adopt that this is the same kind of model with some choice in how they implement it, and with the idea that over time, if they can get results over time, then they'll work within their models. But if they aren't, they might get more supported to doing it in the manner that we've seen work effectively at Sanchez, Cole, Pioneer, and Columbine, as we've reported on in a past presentation also. There is work also to enhance implementation of the positive behavior intervention and supports. Working with folks too to provide them with the raw material that's needed to conduct this work in math, providing with them for tools for progress monitoring chosen by basically schools, so that we now have more work going on in math that we couldn't say was going on in past times when we would have brought to you this kind of a plan. On the last slide, a seemingly very simple idea of a model for how folks teach. Achievement and growth gaps in every regard are an issue. We believe that a root cause, not the only one, is not having a common model, so that the delivery of instruction is inconsistent. The model work that we're proposing here, while this improvement plan only covers a couple years, this is work that goes on over many. The work that's laid out in this particular document points to beginning with a statement of our basic strategy and philosophy for coaching, working to pilot after we've developed some protocols, and as within a number of the other things you might have seen, spending time with principals and making this something that they're receiving learning opportunities on, and that is part of their work. I would add on too, we've got to mention here that some other kinds of raw materials teachers need are sometimes what they use to teach with, and that we've given the materials in science this year at the elementary level also. In the interest of answering questions that you have about the particulars of what we've proposed, I stand ready to answer your questions.
Okay, so thanks for waiting for me to figure out what slide I wanted to look at. So looking at the disparities in academic acceleration, that's one of the things that came up at the dinner at my table today, and there were students there saying that they wish they could have taken advanced math. I don't know whether it occurred to them as middle schoolers to stand up for themselves, but it, of course, brings up what do we do differently with our teachers so that they recognize the potential in the students that may not be the obvious ones? You know, not the ones, you know, like this one girl said, I loved math, but apparently her teacher at the time didn't realize that she liked math a lot. She wasn't, as a student, communicating that.
So we have been, for a fair amount of time, though there was some pausing during the pandemic, tracking the recommendations made by teachers about where a student gets placed in math. And the big points for that kind of tracking to need to happen as part of the whole way of looking at this, right? Not the only solution. I'm not proposing, not saying that we have had this answered. Is when a student moves from middle to high, and from elementary to middle. We really believe that by having good checkpoint data, we can help understand more about that. We've worked to try and make sure that we have the right tools, and one of the pieces that we have here, right, is the second bullet down on slide 10 and under actions is math assessment to support placement. So hopefully by having multiple pieces of information and added encouragement, right? I mean, the challenge is, you know, as you point out from that very good example, knowing a student has the interest may help somebody encourage a higher level placement. I would say we have a long way to go on this to make it work out, and that the model that we have in high school, right, is more about what's the outreach when a student in 9th, 10th, or 11th grade is going to register for courses. That's the point at which there will be an answer that they've given about things they're interested in. There'll be an answer that they've given about who's a trusted adult who can talk to them at school about this. And you know, and we may be able to add in some other information too about, this is a student who has a score that, while not everybody in the past would have said, well, that's a super high score, well, there are plenty of scores that are not super high that are good enough to say, with work, a student has a good chance of succeeding on tests like AP. Also expanding the conversation so that we're talking about advanced courses, but we're also making sure that we promote the great work-based learning opportunities that we have. So I see this as part of a broad system and work over time. We haven't answered it as well for what we're going to do differently at 8th grade or at 5th, but we have a model in high school for 9th, 10th, and 11th that.
So do we not use math assessments now to support placement?
So there was some pausing of what we could do during COVID.
Yeah.
We are in the midst of that conversation right now about, do we keep using the algebra readiness assessment that we have? Do we make a requirement that teachers will use some measure, right? Because we've bought them new measures in some cases. You know, can we work a model where not every student BVSD-wide takes the same test to give a piece of a body of evidence for information about, are they ready to take algebra? But can we do it with using the systems that are in place at schools? So we have, so we will be hopefully finding a good resolution to how we can do that, knowing that the tools that we use, algebra placement was one of the harder things, because it needs to be useful for both a middle level, where the question is really, will the student be accelerated to algebra, or at high school, which may be more about, is the level of proficiency from middle good enough to be at a certain level of algebra with or without support of a certain kind.
And then I have another question about when you talk about the inconsistent use of student data. What exactly does that mean?
Well, so I mean, in working back to the process of a student, this is on on slide number 11, who might potentially be identified referred to an identification process for special education. It's the question more about what happens in advance of that referral. If when a student is first noticed as not making a level of progress, we would expect over time not achieving it to a certain level. That's the point at which a response intervention process starts. Using data effectively in that process and gathering information as immediately as possible about which interventions, short of special education, short of that level of new services, it's in that process that we think there can be gains made, and that the data-driven instruction would allow us, has some real tools for focusing on each student's needs in areas where folks are not succeeding on the major content that they need.
And I have one more question, because I know we talk about the disparity between, students of color, English language learners and so forth. Do we see disparities between boys and girls in terms of who gets suggested or recommended to go into advanced classes?
I don't recall what I found the last time I looked at that. Particularly, we do have some unevenness by content area about whether by gender overall, right? But there's some extent to which the inequity in math is not the same as the inequity in language arts, right? As my thought about that.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Board member, any other questions? Nicole?
I have some questions, thanks. So question to Jorge's point earlier and the timeline for which we received this information. Do we have a plan to improve the process of getting both DAC input and this document to the board with more lead time in years to come?
So I haven't yet started planning out October 15th of 2024 and working backwards from how that would be. I think it's a question about whether the best time to ask DAC about our strategies is in April or May, as opposed to hurry up onboard new DAC members. September's your first meeting. I think there's room to make that happen. I will say that this time around, the work represents a lot of continuation. It's not only that, but a lot of this is continuation and elaboration upon past work. So we're, as we're thinking about this, right? This would have been more problematic had we been proposing completely new things that you all in DAC had never seen. But we will plan October 15th of 2024 and work back from there about how that's the next UIP due date if we achieve at the same level that we've achieved in the past.
And then a couple more questions. So the UIP is intended to be a cycle of continuous improvement. I share some concerns with the DAC around our action steps and implementation benchmarks not being clearly measurable, and most of them have dates that are year-end or plan end. And for quarterly review of that process, I think those dates make quarterly review challenging. Similarly, on this slide struck my as a portion of how these metrics will really improve student outcomes. It said somewhere an action step was to purchase materials, and then an implementation benchmark was to deliver the materials to a school, not mentioning whether or not they'll be used, but that they might be there. So how can we have a little bit more clarity around some of those implementation action steps and implementation benchmarks in the plan moving forward, and that is measurable in a more meaningful way?
It's tricky. I mean, it takes bandwidth. I mean, if we want to go make sure that the teachers are using science materials with fidelity, you have to go watch them use the materials, right? And then you have to have some type of an assessment to then a pre and post test assessment, I guess, would be the way that you would measure that. You know, and so I hear what you're saying, you know, that it would be better if we had these more precise precision measurements to measure if everything was working or not working. But I think it just comes down to bandwidth and staff time and investments there versus investments in other places. And so, you know, not all of the implementation benchmarks are going to show the effectiveness of every action step. Some of them are going to say, you know, can you tell if the action step happened, with then the idea that if you do these action steps that are aligned to the improvement strategies that are aligned to the root cause, that then overall, you know, in achievement, growth, outcomes are going to improve. But it gets really tricky. And so you could do a couple. I don't think you could do all of them, right? But if there was one or two things that were really, really important, right, that's when we would have Jonathan put his program evaluation hat on, right, and do an in-depth. But then that would also take time from most of the folks over there, the academics folks going in, measuring, monitoring, the TOSAs that are doing the coaching and the trainings and those other things. They would have to be pulled into this program evaluation cycle. So I don't think we can. I mean, I think it's always a lens that we'll look at, and not every single action step will get the desired result. I mean, I just think that that's accurate. But it's the major improvement strategies, right, that we're really looking and evaluating, as opposed to the individual action steps, the implementation benchmarks. But if there is a few implementation benchmarks we felt were mission critical, then that's what I think we would go to that program evaluation depth. And then others are we, did we do the action step? Like, can you show some type of evidence, whether it's whether it shows the effectiveness of the action step or not? Did you do it? And I think that, Jonathan, that's the tact that you have to use when you're talking about like 38 different action steps tied to like 6 different major improvement strategies tied to 15 root causes. And you have a couple months and you've got all those other things going on.
And lastly, I just want to add, I appreciate that this is really anchored in our strategic plan in a meaningful way. And in some of the details of the body of the plan, I noticed that specific line items were coming out of feedback from teachers at our teacher roundtables and ways that we need to improve to help support them, and from our community engagement session. So I really appreciate that while it wasn't clearly and explicitly always stated how some of these components of the plan are in there, that as a board member that's participating in the community and in our schools, we know they're coming from the community. And so I really appreciate those aspects of the plan. And I look forward to seeing the edits that hopefully have the gifted addendum included at that time as well, because I noticed that was missing. That's all.
Richard?
Thanks for the presentation, Jonathan. And I'm looking forward to the next iteration or the amended UIP that we'll be approving probably at the next board meeting, correct?
It has to.
Yeah. But looking at the current one, and then looking and then listening to or reading some of the recommendations from DAC as it relates to institutional racism structural racism and all that. And if you look at the root causes in every one of these particular categories, there's inconsistency, language of inconsistency, there's language of structural barriers, all that stuff. And it seems to me like it wouldn't be too difficult to include someplace and acknowledging. You know where I'm going with it?
Yeah,
You do, go ahead.
So we're going to make edits and get them to you on Friday.
Excellent. I'm just saying that if you look at all of the root causes, right? So I'm looking forward to it.
Was that all, Richard? Do you have anything else? Beth, do you have anything?
No, I'm good.
So I just have a question on the instructional model and then the MTSS as it relates to our middle school math. It says we have an inconsistent instructional delivery, which I think is a fancy way of saying we probably need to look at our curriculum. What are our steps for looking at, are we on track for our middle school curriculum? Where are we? Is that something we can identify as a root cause? I'm just thinking about what those middle school math scores looked like because they were pretty bad.
So, instructional model, curriculum can certainly support instructional model, right? But instructional model separate from curriculum. Those are two different things. Think instructional model of, what are the things that the teacher does to gradually release information from the teacher, the resource, to the student. And then what are the steps, the consistent steps that happen so that you ensure that within a lesson or within a series of lessons, right, there's some modeling, there's some exploring, there's some discovery, some introductory activity to get the kids engaged, right? There's some direct and delivery of instruction, there's some guided practice where you give kids opportunities to work on the things, but they're not totally on their own. Then there's this independent practice when they can do it on their own and they can do it at the level of the standard, right? And so an inconsistent instructional delivery model would be not tending to the gradual release of information, not tending to the critical parts of the lesson that make sure that kids are engaged, that you're gradually giving, you release the information to students, right? So they might, maybe a teacher would just teach an instruction and then give kids homework and never give kids a chance to practice, or never checked for understanding, or never used formative assessments in the way to know what to teach longer, what's to teach less. So we do feel like that we're working on this instructional model. And we do have concerns in middle school math. We have concerns with our math acceleration pathway. I mean, we are working, I think, tirelessly right now on math to kind of get our arms around what we need to do, with the idea that could there be a curriculum solution that would help accelerate the delivery of an instructional model that we think that would do the things that we need to do. So sounds like maybe a topic for maybe agenda setting for us to consider, kind of a deep dive on math. I don't know that we've done a deep dive on math overall. We've done literacy, so that might be a suggestion for us to bring the team together to talk about all the things that we're doing on math.
Because when I listened to you talk, Rob, I kept thinking it's delivering instruction, et cetera, that's curriculum. And if we have old curriculum or curriculum that needs to be modified, you can have the best teacher in the world, but if she doesn't have the right curricular tools, then we've kind of tied a hand behind her back, it seems to me.
When you don't have a tight let's think about foundations, right? We've been in classrooms, we've heard from teachers, they love foundations. There's very consistent implementation of foundations because the materials, right, align to the instructional model of how you teach foundations, right? But when you have very loose sets of resources and not curriculum materials, right, then the lesson design gets inconsistent. So it could be, investments in curriculum could create tighter and more consistent. So it could be part of the solution, right? So that's how those things can get connected, because there are times when a curriculum gives you the materials, but it also drives the way that you use the materials. Does that make sense? Am I saying that, academic folks? Am I saying anything wrong there? Okay, just double check.
So I think it would be great at some point, we can maybe talk about during prioritization. I can't think of a time we've had a deep dive into math and into scores and kind of where we are and what we could be looking at.
It seems
And
to keep
certainly-
coming up, so we should probably, I think
Well,
that's
I think
not a
it's
bad
coming up
idea.
because we're looking at the data, and the data is not exactly awesome, especially around middle school. So yeah, let's just put that in I'll add it when I come to my next agenda item. So anything else, board members, around this for Jonathan? Thank you for hanging in there with us on a late evening, and we'll look forward to seeing the final. So Rob, what's the process though? Because it has to be finalized and we have to submit it on the 25th, but if we get it on the Friday and we have proposed changes, how, they go to you? I mean, and how do we share that with the board and what is that?
Yeah, let's talk about this for a second. So our intent would be that we would take the feedback from District Accountability Council, implement the feedback based on kind of where we think things are, and then give it to you on Friday as a draft. We can give you a window of time for each and every board member to provide feedback, ask questions, right? If there's conflicting feedback, we would just have to reach out individually, say one board member wants to add something, one board member doesn't want to add something, and so on and so forth. And then it would come back to you prior to the next board meeting as our finalized version that we intend on putting on the agenda. And then the ways that at that point, because we're up against the time crunch, we could edit it in the meeting if we had to, but I don't know that there's another study pass if you want to start marking it up after that. So we'll give you our best version that we have on Friday. Give you a few days to read through that, make adjustments. But then if we get to the board meeting, there's wants to be a bunch of adjustments. It'll just be a longer board meeting. But we could do that.
Well, don't we have a work session? Is there any way we could do a check-in at the work session in between? I'm just trying to shortcut.
We have a
Yeah.
work session on the 18th.
Right, and this isn't due till the week after that. So I'm just trying to think through process, that's all.
So you'd think like a working session where we'd
We just do a check-in. I'm
edit-
not thinking very long. I mean, I would add it as a check-in because maybe we could see what, I don't know, Rob, I'm just trying to, because I know you guys are up against the line and
I mean, if the board is comfortable with, if the board's comfortable with DAX edits, right? Which is, if I didn't hear anybody say anything other than they disagree with DAX edits. And if the board's comfortable with the general premises of what Jonathan has presented, right? Which again, DAC was supportive of a lot of what's in there. And if you're both supportive of those things and we merge them together, I don't think we're going to be far off. That's why I think if we just give you a short edit window, and then mark it up and we'll go back to work and get you a final version. If we give it to you Friday and then we ask it back by Monday and then you give us a bunch of comments, I don't know that we can turn it around in 24 hours to have a check-in on Tuesday. I just don't think that we can probably pull it off. But what we can do is take all your feedback and give you an edit and give you another version by the following Friday, right? And if there's any showstoppers, right, then just let us know, and then we would try to provide those edits when we present and ask the board, we try to engage you at that point. I mean, I think we're going to be okay, unless the board thinks differently.
no, I think we are too. I was just trying to figure out what the collaborative process looked like so we know what people are saying and what it kind of looks like. So we'll see how
So what
this
I can do
goes.
is we can create a. So
I don't want to
you
create
want
more work. I'm just wanting
yeah.
to figure out how we get from here to the 25th.
So does everybody want to know what everybody says on the document? Because I just share that with you all if that's important for everybody.
I'm okay waiting until you guys do the presentation. I trust you very much. And I know that you're not saying you don't trust them, but I feel like if you include DAC recommendations on the revised version, I'm satisfied with that.
I'm not saying I don't trust anyone, Richard. I'm just. Okay. I'm just trying to clarify our role and make sure that we have the kind of input we need and that we fulfill our job that we're supposed to in getting the UIP filed. So we'll just see how it goes, Rob. We can correct course. We have 2 weeks, so.
Okay.
All the time in the world.
It's a lot of work. Thank you, Jonathan. All right, so the last is future agenda requests. Board members, future agenda requests. Kitty?
Yes, I would like to talk again about language and our use of the term Latinx, and just talk about, what that means, and whether, as a district, we're going to use it in our written communications, and if so, under what circumstances.
Okay, can we add that to, maybe we can talk about that during prioritization and see what we think? Nicole?
I would like to make sure we add a dive into math and math pathways into our board prioritization list. And then also, I was under the impression, based on our policy review schedule, that we were going to be discussing JECCR in September, and that schools have to have a process outlined for their open enrollment practices on October 12th. We haven't reviewed that policy, and OE starts November 1st. And so I was just wondering where we are with that. And whether that is something that we are going to have on the agenda, or if we're going to punt that and put it back on the prioritization for later in the year.
Can we have Kathleen answer that? Is that all right, Kathleen?
You are going to see it on October 25th.
That's a pretty clear answer. Is that all right?
How about no later than October 25th?
Well, with talking about policies, I'd like to maybe request that we add using institutional racism, structural racism as our North Star as it relates to revising policy for BVSD.
Anything else for Beth?
Yeah, just one little thing. I want us to take a look at the calendar dates for our proposed meetings, both for our regular and our special meetings. Right now, it's listed online as June 6th and June 20th, and typically we have 3 meetings in June. I propose that we have our first Tuesday meeting in June, whatever that is, June 6th, also June, 13th, and the first 3 Tuesdays of June is we have our meetings, as opposed to what it's been in the past. Just take a look at our meeting dates for the year, that's all.
The only problem with that is budget. So we'll just have to, it might be a little early to think about it, but we certainly could.
I think our last meeting date then would be June 20th, is that correct? Let me pull up my calendar real quick. Yep, the third Tuesday in June is June 20th. So I don't know, just from like a budget perspective, I don't know if that works.
Well, let's certainly keep it in mind as we go forward, because I don't know that we know how. I've been on this board when we've enacted the budget on June 29th. So it's just hard to say.
Fair enough.
All right, anything else for the good of the order? All right, thanks everyone for hanging in there for a good meeting, and we'll see you all next week.